Story 1, we thought she was gone forever. Until the doorbell rang. The sun hovered low in the sky, filtering through half-open blinds, casting long ivory stripes across the high-ceilinged living room. Casa Moreno, a name spoken with reverence by neighbors, whispered with pain by those who lived within. This is home, yet tonight, the air carries a charge, as if the walls themselves hold their breath. In the center of the room, a grand piano, once the pride of the family, gathers dust. Sheet music lies in disarray on the floor, an echo of laughter and evening recitals long past. Here begins our story. We meet Ana Moreno, the daughter, returning after a 5-year hiatus. She steps from a sleek black car, glancing up at the familiar facade. The curtains twitch, a silent greeting or a wary watcher. Her fingertips brush the aged wood doorframe, memories flood in, scent of fresh baked bread, her father humming a lullaby, the first time her mother scolded her for missing curfew. Now, everything feels paused, time held an unfinished breath. Inside, Miguel Moreno, the father, hovers near the mantel. His gaze flickers over faded photographs, Anna's childhood smile, her sister Isabel's graduation day, and one frame blurred by tears. Miguel's suit is impeccable, too perfect. Yet his eyes betray an aching tiredness. This home, once filled with clarity, now kneels under secrets. Anna notices the tension, even the air feels thicker, burdened. A soft chime breaks the quiet, the antique clock marking 6 p.m. sharp, Dad's time for calling Isabel, long absent. Anna remembers, Isabel left home 2 years ago without explanation. No calls, no messages. Just silence. Tonight, Anna's arrival seems planned, but something's amiss. She watches Miguel lift his phone as though bracing against a storm. Then, Elena Moreno, the mother, glides in, graceful as porcelain, her expression schooled to warmth. But Anna remembers the tremor in her hands, the stifled sigh behind the forced smile. It was Elena who stitched the family's wounds with kindness, even if her own heart bled unseen. She pauses when Anna steps into view, her smile flickers, then steadies. A caress, a hug, tight, practiced, protective. More for Miguel than for Anna. Something unsaid lies buried in that embrace. Anna breaks it. I'm back, she says, voice flat yet charged with unshed emotion. The words float between them, caught in the tension of years. Elena's eyes glisten, but she answers, we saved your room. The sentence trembles with vigilance. Miguel clears his throat, dinner in an hour. It's what families say when what's to come is anything but dinner. The clock ticks on. Anna wanders toward the piano, straightens a sheet titled Isabel's Lament. She runs her finger over the faded title. You remember this? She asks gently. Elena sighs, we hoped your sister would finish it. But she quit, right after you left. A dagger thrust in gentle words. Anna closes her eyes. Isabel. The one who remained silent through everything. The living room dims as dusk deepens outside. Anna senses a stir of anticipation, like the hushed hush before thunder. Something in the house recognizes her presence and shivers. She realizes, this return isn't just for reconciliation, it's for reckoning. Miguel returns with a single black envelope, distinct from the others on the mantel. He places it on the piano. The scratch of the envelope stamp across the wood reverberates, a note worse than any missed chord. Elena flinches as she sees it, color draining. Anna's heart thunders. What's that? Miguel doesn't answer. He meets Anna's eyes, and in his solemn gaze, she reads desire and dread. Open it, he whispers. The silence that follows is thick enough to choke on. Anna inhales, weighs the moment, and reaches for the envelope. It trembles in her fingers like a butterfly's wing, delicate, dangerous, ready to take flight or die. She breaks the seal. The paper inside is folded once, twice, like layers of unspoken truths. She unfolds it. There, in spidery handwriting, is a single line, your sister wants to come home. The envelope slips from her hands. Her breath stops. Elena turns away, pressing a slender hand to her lips. Miguel's jaw tightens. The moment cracks, exposition has set the scene, the fractured house, estranged daughter, absent sister. The rising tension ascends. That letter, a small piece of paper, holds the power to fracture or repair. The inciting incident, Isabel's potential return, is now more than possibility. It's inevitable. The evening's calm fractured the moment Anna slid the black envelope free. Her pulse tapped a frantic rhythm as Miguel's voice trembled, quiet yet commanding. We should talk before dinner. The corners of Elena's mouth quivered, but her composure remained intact. Still, the tension, like taut wire, thrummed through the room. Under Gustav Freydig's pyramid, this opening of undisclosed motives propels us from exposition into rising action, raising stakes and conflict. The dinner room glowed in amber lamplight, flickering shadows across the long polished table. Elena poured wine into 4 delicate glasses, her hands shaky. Miguel paired them up, his fingers lingering over Anna's. No clinking of crystal, no immediate toast, just a hush. Anna laid the envelope before Miguel. What does she mean, come home? Miguel's gaze hardened. Isabel isn't ready. But his eyes darted toward Elena, whose breath hitched. The answer lay somewhere inside her. Under the lens of growing suspense, readers wonder, who is the author of this letter? Why now, after 2 years of deafening silence? These questions surge into every line of dialogue, perfectly in line with dramatic structure's demand for rising tension. Elena? Anna prompted. Elena's lips trembled. Your sister. She came back to me once. In a dream. The words fell like tiny bombs. Anna's throat tightened. Miguel's expression stayed frozen in grief. She was sick. And he swallowed. We had no choice. The tempo of the conversation escalated. Anna watched them defy their own composure. A storm was near. Why now? Anna pressed gently. The faint rustle of distant wind, though no window was open, rattled the chandelier. It felt like nature itself held its breath. Into this psychic stillness, Elena's voice surfaced, hushed but firm. I got a call this morning, from the clinic. A name matched ours. She paused, trembling. They said there was a patient named Isabel Moreno. Anna's skin prickled with cold. The wine swirled in her glass, its redness echoing her pulse. She fought the impulse to break something, anything. Instead, she asked, is she alive? Miguel cast his gaze to the floor. We don't know. A silence filled to suffocation fell. In literary tradition, this moment fulfills one of Freydig's inciting incidents that drive conflict skyward. Anna's chest heaved. Her world, which only hours ago felt fractured, but contained, now unfurled into uncertainty. Isabel might still be alive. And coming home. Dinner finally commenced, chicken roasted golden, mashed potatoes, vegetables. Forks clinked, but no one tasted. Words hung over plates. What if she arrives? What if she's resentful? Or worse, what if she blames them? Halfway through, Elena excused herself. Anna watched her retreat down the hall, shoulders slumped. She followed quietly, finding Elena in the dim corridor, pressed against a wall for support. Tears blurred her vision. I never stopped loving her, she whispered. Even when we lost every ounce of hope. Anna's heart cracked. She placed a hand on her mother's back. We did what we thought was best. Elena's breath came ragged. Was it justice? Anna had no answer. They stayed intertwined, mother and daughter, shadows entwined by grief and guilt. In that moment, the true weight of Isabel's absence, and possible return, landed heavily. The conflict, under Freydig's rising action, deepened not through physical action, but emotional revelation, and deeper sacrifices to come. Back at the table, Miguel sat alone, head bowed. Anna returned beside him, perching on the edge of her chair. He looked up. Unspoken apology in his eyes. Help me, he said. Anna nodded. She drew a breath that tasted like fear. Ahead lay decisions harder than any exam she'd ever faced, but ones she knew they had to meet. In the foyer, unnoticed in the hall closet, a single pair of shoes lay dusty, Isabel's. No longer out of place, they waited, ominous. A signpost, the family's fateful crossroads. The night stretches thin, taut as a wire about to snap. Dinner's aftermath lingers in the kitchen, half-washed dishes, the empty black envelope folded beside the sink. Anna wakes restless, footsteps echoing down the dark hallway toward the study, a room she hasn't entered since childhood. The soft glow of a desk lamp slices through the gloom. On the desk, a framed photograph of 3 sisters, Anna, Isabel, and a toddler Anna can barely remember. Isabel's face is blurred, like a fading dream. Miguel enters silently. She called, he confesses. Isabel. She's outside. His voice trembles. The house holds its breath. According to Freydig, this marks the point of greatest emotional reversal, what he terms the climax, the turning moment when everything changes. They both stand frozen, facing the photograph. The weight of years rests on one breath. Anna's heart pounds. She sees the silhouette of Isabel through the frosted glass door, tall, hesitant, a bouquet of black and white daisies in her hand. Miguel stiffens. I thought we buried her. Elena joins them, eyes red, voice a trembling whisper, "We thought we did." Their shared grief becomes grief multiplied, an unbearable force pressing them toward collision. Anna moves first, unlocking the door. It swings open to reveal Isabel, older now, ashes in her expression. Her voice cracks. "I'm sorry." 3 words that land with seismic force. The vase of flowers trembles in her grip. In that instant, the house fractures, not physically, but spiritually. This is the pivot, the emotional climax, where rising action peaks and the characters must confront realities they've evaded. Silence follows, brief, deafening. Isabel steps inside, brushing past Anna. Their eyes meet, a calm wariness, tempered by shared blood and deeper wounds. Miguel closes the door behind her with deliberate care, like sealing fate. Moments stretch. Elena collapses into a chair, burying her face in her hands. Anna holds Isabel's gaze, offering no warmth, no mercy. "Why now?" she demands. Isabel inhales. "I was sick," she confesses, voice hushed. "Acute leukemia. I didn't want to scare you. The hospital. The transplant. I survived. But She trails off. Tears fall. The confession cuts deeper than absence ever did. Anna's chest tightens, anger, relief, pain, confusion whirl together. "You survived," she whispers. "So? You left us to die without you?" Isabel's eyes shine with regret. "I thought I was protecting you." Her words shatter the remaining calm. It's sudden, devastating, exactly the kind of tragic force Freydig describes in The Falling Action, yet its roots lie in this most climactic admission. Elena sobs, "All this time. You were alive." Miguel crumples beside his wife, chest heaving. Anna steps toward Isabel. Her voice is low but sharp. "And we did what?" she asks. "Buried hope? Let you drift in silence?" She draws near, searching her sister's face. "You left because you were afraid?" Isabel nods. "I couldn't face the guilt. Or the fear of failing you." Anna clasps her sister's hands, fingers trembling. Emotions surge, rage, pity, longing. "We are fractured," she says. "But maybe." Her voice softens. "Maybe this is how we start to fix it." Isabel's face twists, hope and terror wrestle across her features. Miguel and Elena hold each other, tears of relief and sorrow mingling. The air crackles with fragile energy. The crisis, the emotional apex, is met. The question now, can they descend from this peak without breaking entirely? As midnight chimes, the family remains in the glow of that charged moment. The climax has come, truth laid bare, wounds exposed. Tomorrow, the fallout begins. The spiral down from the peak, into Freydig's falling action, awaits, and with it, new choices to be made. This is their return from the emotional summit, their descent into the tension's wake, with the faint hope of repair. Discussion unfolds around breakfast, scrambled eggs, fresh bread, coffee, ordinary food against an extraordinary backdrop. Isabel begins sharing her journey, the isolation of hospitals, the sting of rebuked phone calls, the loneliness of survival under another name. Her voice shakes with vulnerability. Anna listens, not poised in anger, but leaning forward, absorbing each tremor. Their parents hover in the background, fragile observers. Elena tries to speak but chokes on apology. We thought you were gone. We mourned endlessly." Her words twist between relief and regret. Miguel moves toward Isabel, holds out a tentative hand. Isabel nods, tears in her dark eyes. They embrace, slow, cautious, but sincere. A father's forgiveness offered, hope for a fragile bond restored. In Freydig's terms, this is the moment of final suspense, just before the full resolution. The family's fate hangs in tension. Will forgiveness hold, or will past betrayal crumble their fragile peace? The morning sun climbs higher as old routines re-enter the house. Anna fetches mail, Isabel sorts through old drawings and family photos with Elena, Miguel tends to the garden with hesitant conversation. Each small act is a test, gloves touched, words exchanged, trust extended. Then a call interrupts, from Isabel's doctor. She's been invited to join a long-term follow-up study, an opportunity to help others who share her diagnosis. The news stops them all. Isabel's face tilts upward, hope and fear entangled. She turns to her parents. "If I do this, I need you with me." Their silence speaks volumes. Finally, Miguel squeezes her hand. Elena nods, voice soft, "We'll be there. All of us." The decision cements the beginning of a new path, their reconciliation gaining momentum. Confidence blooms in Isabel's eyes, and the family's fractured bonds begin to weld themselves, slowly but irreversibly. Falling action and melody, the remnants of the high-impact climax are still present, but there's forward movement, action that leads to resolution. Melodrama, too, often centers on such moments of narrative stasis or dramatic tension where characters must reckon with choices and their consequences. By afternoon, laughter drifts through the kitchen window. Isabel clears dishes, Anna jokes about burning toast. Elena and Miguel collapse into chairs, watching the two sisters move through familiar roles with new ease. The walls, once corridors of pain, now echo with ordinary warmth, still fragile, but hopeful. Before dusk, Anna and Isabel take a walk to the old oak tree in the backyard, one they climbed as children. Isabel hesitates, then places her bouquet beneath the tree, petals brushing the bark. Anna stands beside her, the sun filtering through branches overhead. "Welcome home," Anna whispers. Isabel smiles, relief shining. As they return to the house, the siblings step across a boundary formed by truth, tears, and truth again. Their footsteps are soft, but deliberate. The fall has begun, waving goodbye to the peak's agony and heading toward resolution. The next morning rises with a rare stillness. For the first time in years, Casa Moreno does not feel like a mausoleum. The walls seem to exhale. The kitchen smells of cinnamon and warm butter, and light spills generously through the windows as if blessing the four souls now gathered inside. There is no loud declaration, no dramatic speech, just the clinking of forks, the warmth of shared presence. This is the quiet triumph of survival. Isabel laughs at something Anna says, genuinely, without hesitation. The sisters, once split by secrets, now trade playful jabs over pancakes. Miguel smiles from behind his newspaper, not really reading. Elena hums while she wipes down the counter, her body finally moving without the stiffness of old guilt. It is mundane and miraculous all at once. After breakfast, Anna leads Isabel to the attic. It's dusty, boxes stacked to the ceiling, filled with fragments of their old lives. They open one together. Inside, childhood sketchbooks, letters never sent, and a Polaroid of all four of them from the summer of '04. Isabel stares at it for a long time. "This was the day I broke my ankle jumping off the swings," she whispers. Anna nods. "And you insisted on walking home just to prove you could." They both smile, remembering not just the pain, but the courage. In this attic, among memories faded but not forgotten, they begin something sacred. They sort. They laugh. They cry. They forgive. And as Isabel finds the old scarf she'd lost before leaving, she holds it close, like a thread tying her back to everything she thought she'd destroyed. Fredig's final phase, denouement, asks not for grandeur, but for truth. And the truth is this: reconciliation is not a one-time act. It's a process. A choice made every day. That afternoon, the family gathers in the garden. The sun hangs high, soft golden light blanketing everything. Miguel sets up a small table under the lemon tree. Isabel lays out notebooks, and Anna brings out fresh lemonade. Elena sits with her knitting, though she rarely knits. Her hands are busy because her heart is full. Isabel clears her throat. "Before I left the hospital, the counselor gave me this prompt: describe the thing that broke you, and the thing that brought you back." She looks at them. I couldn't answer it. Not until now. She reaches into her bag and pulls out her journal. "What broke me was fear. What brought me back was you." Elena wipes away a tear, and Miguel's eyes glisten. Anna reaches over and squeezes Isabel's hand. Later that evening, Anna walks Isabel to her car. She'll be gone a week, meeting with doctors, enrolling in the follow-up study. "You sure you want to do this?" Anna asks. Isabel smiles. "I'm sure. And this time, I'm coming back." They hug, tighter than they ever have, not with desperation, but with assurance. As Isabel drives away, Anna stands on the porch for a long time, watching her sister disappear down the winding road. She feels something shift inside her, no longer burden, but space to grow, to forgive, to love differently. Inside the house, the piano waits. Anna sits and begins to play again. The piece Isabel once started, unfinished for so long, has new chords now. Anna adds her own, letting the music rise and fall in gentle waves. The melody is imperfect, like all families. But it's real. Down the hall, Miguel and Elena begin to frame a new picture for the mantel. One from this morning, taken by timer, all four of them in the backyard, smiling like they mean it. The past still lingers, in drawers, in walls, in scars, but it no longer controls the air they breathe. The story doesn't end with a dramatic reunion or perfect healing. It ends with something more honest, a family choosing, day by day, to be whole again. To live in the truth, no matter how painful. To reach out even when it's hard. To return to each other, even when they're lost. And maybe that's the truest kind of home, not the one you're born into, not the one that breaks you, but the one you return to when you finally understand its worth. Story 2, I took a dog home to save his life. I didn't know he'd save mine. I never wanted to be the one holding the needle. Working at a small-town veterinary clinic wasn't anyone's dream. Not mine, anyway. It was long hours, low pay, the smell of antiseptic that clung to your skin, and far too many goodbyes. But the part I dreaded most, the part that kept me awake on nights when the world was otherwise quiet, was what we called convenience euthanasia. That's the polite term for it. What it really meant was ending the life of an animal not because it was sick, not because it was suffering, but because someone, somewhere, decided they didn't want to deal with it anymore. I hated it. Every single time. Some days it was a senior dog who'd lost his hearing. Other times, it was a cat that had stopped using the litter box. But that day, it was a mutt named Leo. He came in on a Tuesday morning, tail wagging, tongue out, completely unaware of the ticking clock overhead. His owner, a man in his 30s wearing a baby carrier strapped to his chest, looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. "This is Leo," he said, glancing away. "He barks. A lot. And he's not great with the baby. I can't do it anymore." He said it like he was returning a shirt that didn't fit. Not a living, breathing animal who'd probably slept curled at his feet 100 nights. Leo didn't seem to mind. He looked up at me with soft, brown eyes, tail thumping against the floor. There was no aggression. No anxiety. Just a hopeful kind of energy, like he thought he was going on a walk. I nodded, heart sinking, and led Leo toward the back. My coworkers avoided my eyes. They knew how I felt. I'd never gotten used to it, and I never wanted to. In the prep room, I laid out the supplies mechanically. Syringe. Gloves. Alcohol. I could do this in my sleep. But as I turned back to Leo, who now sat patiently, tail still wagging, I froze. He tilted his head at me, like he could tell something was wrong. That instinct dogs have, the kind that sees through us. I knelt down in front of him, and he licked my face without hesitation. I couldn't do it. I couldn't be the one to dim that light. My hands trembled as I stood up. I told the others I'd handle it alone. Then, instead of going through with it, I made a choice I hadn't planned. I went to my boss, lied through my teeth, and said the owner had changed his mind. He decided to take Leo back, I told him. Said he needed more time. It wasn't true. The man had already driven off without a second glance. That night, Leo rode home in the passenger seat of my car, tongue lolling out of his mouth as if nothing had changed. But for me, everything had. I told myself it was temporary. That I'd keep him for a few days. Maybe a week. Just until I found him a better family. One that deserved him. That was the plan. But Leo had other plans. Within 2 days, he'd claimed the couch, the foot of my bed, and, somehow, my heart. He followed me from room to room like a furry shadow, barked at the microwave like it was a threat to our safety, and wagged his tail every single time I looked at him, even if I'd just looked away a second ago. He wasn't the easiest dog. But he was mine. I didn't save him because I thought I needed him. I saved him because he didn't deserve what was coming. At the time, I had no idea I'd need him more than I could imagine. Leo settled into my life like he'd always belonged there. He made himself at home without asking permission, curling up on my clean laundry, chewing the corners of rugs, barking at the vacuum like it had insulted his mother. It was chaos, but it was the kind I could laugh about. I hadn't realized how quiet my apartment had been until he filled it with noise. We developed a rhythm. He waited by the door every evening, knowing I'd be back from work by 6. I'd slip off my shoes, drop my keys in the bowl, and before I could even sigh, he'd already placed a toy in my lap. Some days, I was too exhausted to play. He didn't care. He just wanted to be near me. But life doesn't stay kind forever. Not even with a dog waiting at the door. It started with the breakup. He said he needed space. I said nothing. He packed a duffel bag and took the last of the plants, and suddenly half the apartment felt hollow. Leo kept sniffing the door for days afterward, tail wagging in confusion every time someone walked past in the hallway. Like he was still hoping someone else might come back. Then came the job. The clinic downsized. Budget cuts. I was the last one hired, so the first to go. No warning, just a "we are so sorry" and an envelope that barely covered 2 weeks' rent. I remember walking out with a cardboard box of cheap mugs and dog stickers, wondering if the universe had a vendetta against me. I told myself I'd bounce back. That it was temporary. But 1 week bled into the next. Rent notices slid under my door. My savings dried up faster than I expected. Applications were sent, interviews went nowhere, and every day I found it harder to leave bed. Harder to answer texts. Harder to pretend I was okay. Through it all, Leo stayed. He didn't ask for explanations. Didn't care that the pantry was growing emptier or that I stopped opening the blinds. When I curled into a corner of the couch and stared at the same blank space on the wall for hours, he'd lay his head on my chest, like he could hold my broken pieces together with his weight alone. Some nights, I caught myself staring at him while he slept. Wondering how long I could keep doing this. How long I could keep us afloat. One night, I snapped. There was no warning. No final straw. Just a quiet kind of collapse. The kind that happens in silence, like snow falling. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, knees pulled to my chest, staring at nothing. The room felt airless. Heavy. I reached for a pen. And then I started writing. A note. Just a few lines. The kind that people write when they've convinced themselves there's no one left to disappoint. My hand shook. The silence was unbearable. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just existed in that cold, frozen moment where giving up felt like the only exit that made sense. Then, out of nowhere, Leo barked. One sharp sound. Loud. Jarring. Then another. And another. He stood in front of me, tail still, eyes locked onto mine. Like he knew. Like he understood. He kept barking. Louder. Angrier. Until I looked up. Until I heard him. It snapped something loose in me. The dam cracked. My breath hitched. And then I broke. I dropped the pen. Reached out. Pulled him close. And sobbed. I sobbed into his fur, holding him like a life preserver in a storm I had no strength to fight. He didn't move. He didn't bark again. He just let me cry, his head resting against my shoulder like it was exactly where it needed to be. That night, Leo didn't save my life with some heroic act or dramatic intervention. He just didn't let me disappear. When dawn broke, it didn't feel like a miracle. There was no cinematic sunrise, no sudden sense of peace. Just gray light creeping through the blinds, touching everything like a ghost. The kind of morning that feels like it's holding its breath, waiting to see if you'll make it out of bed. But I was still here. And Leo was still next to me. I woke with my face pressed into his fur, my fingers still twisted in his collar like I was afraid to let go in my sleep. He was awake. His eyes found mine, and his tail gave a quiet thump against the mattress. No judgment. No questions. Just presence. I hadn't planned for the next morning. I'd only written a note, not a future. But now I had to think about coffee, and food, and what to do with a heart that still hurt but was, undeniably, still beating. I dragged myself up and made the world's worst cup of coffee. Burnt and bitter. I drank it anyway. Leo sat by the kitchen doorway, watching every move like it was part of a ritual he was determined to keep me inside. That's the thing about dogs, they don't need speeches or explanations. They just need to be near you. And that's what he did. He followed me into the bathroom and sat beside the tub while I showered for the first time in days. He lay quietly beside the couch while I scrolled job listings I had no energy to apply for. When I broke down crying again, without reason, without warning, he came over, rested his chin on my thigh, and waited. No whining. No barking. Just steady silence. A week passed. Then 2. The world didn't become easier. But it started becoming possible. I began doing small things again. I cleaned the dishes I'd let pile up. I folded the laundry that had gone stale in the basket. I opened the windows. The light felt harsh at first, like a spotlight on everything I wasn't. But Leo didn't seem to mind. He sat in the sunbeam like it was the best part of his day. One morning, I opened my closet, stared at the mess, and made another choice. I called a therapist. It wasn't brave. It felt terrifying. But I did it. I booked an appointment and wrote it on the calendar in shaky pen. The morning of, I almost didn't go. But Leo sat at the door when he saw me put on shoes, tail wagging, mouth open in a silent, doggy smile. And somehow, I went. Therapy didn't change everything at once. But it gave me space. Space to say the things I hadn't even admitted to myself. Space to be messy. To be honest. To not be okay. Every night, Leo curled up next to me like clockwork. And every morning, he woke up as if nothing in the world could go wrong, just because we were together. Eventually, I got a part-time job at a bookstore. Quiet. Low stress. A place where no one asked too many questions. It wasn't enough to pay all the bills, but it was something. A beginning. Leo became a local celebrity. People came in just to see the bookstore dog. He'd sit by the door, greeting everyone like he was part employee, part guardian, part emotional support animal. He probably was all three. And slowly, so slowly I almost didn't notice, things got better. Not perfect. Not easy. But better. There were still nights when the dark thoughts came creeping back. Still mornings when I had to fight the weight of nothing. But they were no longer constant. They were no longer stronger than me. Because I had something to hold on to. A warm body. A wet nose. A pair of eyes that looked at me like I was still worth showing up for. I used to think I saved Leo that day at the clinic. But I was starting to realize the truth. He'd been sent to save me. A full year had passed since that night. 12 months since I sat on the edge of my bed, note in hand, not knowing if I'd see another sunrise. Now, I wake up most mornings to the sound of Leo stretching dramatically on the floor, letting out a groan like an old man who'd seen too much. He still sleeps next to me, though these days he prefers the cool spot by the window. We've both aged a little. Grayer around the edges. Slower on the stairs. But we're still here. Still. Us. The bookstore job eventually turned into something steadier. I became the assistant manager, then the event coordinator. I started organizing dog-friendly reading nights, Paws and Pros, we called it. It was a hit. Leo was always the star. Kids read to him. Teens took selfies with him. Regulars brought treats tucked into their pockets just for him. He soaked it all up like sunshine. And me? I stopped feeling like a background character in my own life. I started drawing again. Nothing fancy, just quiet sketches at night, Leo sleeping, street corners, little moments that felt too gentle to forget. I joined a support group for people who'd struggled with depression. I didn't say much the first few times. But I kept going. And when someone else spoke their pain out loud, I felt less alone. I started calling my parents again, too. That one took time. They hadn't known. I hadn't told them how bad it got. I didn't have the words then. I still don't have all of them now. But one night, over the phone, my mom said, "You sound lighter." And I realized she was right. The weight hadn't vanished. I'd just gotten stronger. Leo helped with that. He reminded me, every day, that love doesn't need to be spoken to be real. It just needs to show up. Over and over and over again. We went on more walks. Longer ones. Out of the neighborhood and into the woods nearby. He loved the trails, ears perked, tongue out, tail wagging like a metronome set to joy. Sometimes we sat by the river and watched the water move. He'd lay his head on my leg, and I'd scratch behind his ears, and nothing had to be said. He was older now. I could see it in the way he hesitated before jumping onto the couch, the way he sighed deeper when he lay down. His muzzle had gone mostly white. His eyes clouded just a little. I'd saved him from death once. But I knew. I couldn't keep him forever. That thought would creep in sometimes. Late at night. In the quiet moments. And I'd hold him a little tighter, grateful that for now, I didn't have to let go. One afternoon, we returned from a walk and I found a note slipped under our door. It was from our upstairs neighbor, the one who barely spoke more than a polite hi since I moved in. "I don't know your story," it read, "but I wanted to say thank you. I hear your dog bark sometimes. I hear you laugh. I see you both out walking. And it helps. More than you know." I sat on the floor with that note in my hand, Leo curled up beside me. And I realized something I hadn't let myself believe before. Maybe healing wasn't just for me. Maybe it reached further than I ever intended. Leo didn't just save my life. He gave me one worth sharing. We weren't perfect. We never would be. But we were here. Still wagging. Still walking forward. Still learning how to live. Leo's legs don't work the way they used to. He still tries, always tries, but these days, it takes him longer to get up from the floor. His back legs tremble sometimes. He sleeps more. Dreams more, too. Sometimes he twitches in his sleep, chasing something only he can see. The vet calls it normal aging, and I nod, but my chest tightens a little more every time. I knew this would happen. I just didn't know it would happen so fast. We've had 3 years together now. 3 full turns of the seasons. I can chart my healing by them, by his bark, by his walks, by the soft weight of him sleeping against me at night. And now, I feel time slipping through our hands, quiet as dust. But Leo doesn't seem afraid. He lives like he always has, in the moment. Tail wagging. Nose in the wind. Sitting beside me like nothing else in the world matters but being near each other. Sometimes I wonder what he remembers. If he knows that once, years ago, he was minutes from death. If he remembers that day at the clinic, the fluorescent lights, the smell of bleach and stainless steel, my shaking hands. If he remembers that I saved him. But I think Leo remembers something different. I think he remembers that, when I was at my lowest, he barked until I looked up. He remembers that I held onto him when I couldn't hold onto anything else. That I woke up because of him. That I stayed because of him. And maybe that's enough. These days, we take shorter walks. Sometimes he can't make it down the stairs, so I carry him. His body's heavier now, but I've grown stronger. In more ways than one. On good days, he still gets excited when I open the treat drawer. Still insists on sleeping with his head on my foot. Still perks up when I say the word outside. On slower days, we just sit by the window. He naps while I read or sketch or sip lukewarm coffee. We don't talk, but we've never needed words, have we? I've thought about what comes next. About the day I'll have to say goodbye. I've rehearsed it in my head 100 times. I've cried about it quietly, on drives home, in the shower, when the house is too still. But then I look at Leo, and I realize, he doesn't care about that. He only cares about now. About this exact second. And so, I stay here. I sit with him. I let him lean on me. I scratch his ears and whisper, I'm here, again and again. Because the truth is, I've been waiting for the day I'd have to let him go. But Leo? He's never waited. He's only ever stayed. Maybe the greatest gift he gave me wasn't pulling me back from the edge. Maybe it was teaching me how to stay. How to sit in the silence. How to love in the ordinary. How to hold space for grief and joy. How to choose the world, again and again, even when it hurts. He taught me that staying isn't passive. It's a decision. It's a kind of bravery. One evening, after a short walk, Leo curled up beside me on the porch. The air was crisp. The trees had just started to turn orange. He rested his head in my lap, eyes fluttering closed, sighing like he had nothing left to prove. I ran my fingers through his fur, kissed the top of his head, and whispered, "Thank you." And I swear, just for a moment, he smiled. That night, we stayed up late. No music. No distractions. Just breathing, side by side, the way we always had. Because I saved him once. And he saved me right back. And that was always enough. I don't know when exactly it hit me, the realization that Leo wouldn't be with me forever. Maybe it was the morning he couldn't make it up onto the bed and didn't even try. Or the first time he didn't bark at the doorbell, choosing instead to sleep through it. Maybe it was the vet's gentle sigh after our last checkup. The way she placed a hand on my shoulder, not to tell me what was wrong, but to prepare me for what was coming. The day didn't come with warning. It never does. It started like any other. I made coffee, fed Leo his breakfast, and opened the curtains so the morning light could pour in. He didn't come to the kitchen right away. I found him still lying on his bed by the window, his eyes on me, soft and distant. He didn't get up, even when I rustled the treat bag. Still breathing. Still watching me. But something in his gaze had changed. I sat down beside him, careful not to disturb his blanket. His tail moved, just barely, but enough. Enough to tell me he knew I was there. Enough to tell me he wasn't scared. I stayed with him for hours that day. No music. No phone. Just the silence between us, filled with the memories only we shared. I whispered everything I needed to say. That I loved him. That he was the best thing that ever happened to me. That I would have chosen him 1,000 times over. That I was okay now, really okay. That it was safe for him to rest. His breathing slowed. His body relaxed. And in the final moment, there was no fear. No panic. Just peace. Like he'd decided it was time. And he trusted me to carry the rest. I buried Leo in a quiet field just outside town. A place with trees, and wildflowers in spring, and no fences. The vet helped. She didn't charge me. Said it was an honor. I marked the spot with a simple stone. No name. No dates. Just one word, etched into the surface: stayed. Because that's what he did. Until the very end. It's been 3 months since then. I still hear his pause sometimes, phantom sounds echoing down the hall. I still pause by the treat aisle at the store before I remember. I still reach for his leash on rainy mornings, still check the foot of the bed before I climb in. Grief is like that. It doesn't scream. It sits quietly in the background, touching everything. But so does love. I started volunteering at a local shelter. Walked their dogs. Cleaned kennels. Folded towels. One day, they asked if I'd help with their euthanasia records, said they needed someone who understood both sides. I said yes. Not because I wanted to relive that pain, but because I knew what it meant to choose compassion. Even when it hurts. I talk to people now. I tell them about Leo. About what he taught me. That staying is brave. That love is loud in small ways. That even if you think you're broken beyond repair, some creature, some moment, might find you, and remind you that you still matter. One rainy afternoon, a young woman brought in a dog. Scruffy. Nervous. Big eyes. She said he barked too much. That she couldn't keep him anymore. I looked down at the dog. He looked up at me. And just for a moment, I saw Leo in his eyes. I smiled. Then I made a phone call. Because this time, I had a plan. And I already knew how the story would end. Story 3, as a kid, I walked into the night in my sleep. And I never came back alone. It must have been just past midnight. I was around 9 or 10 years old, and my family had long been asleep. In our small town in Vietnam, nights were quiet, just the humming of cicadas and the occasional bark of a stray dog echoing through the alleyways. Our house was modest but safe, the doors always locked before bed. But somehow, that night, I wasn't in bed. I only know the beginning of the story through my mother, years later, in a casual conversation that turned my stomach cold. You know, I saw you walking out of the house that night, she had said, almost like a joke. What night? I asked, confused. You don't remember? She said, laughing a little. You were sleepwalking. You just opened the door and walked out. It was maybe midnight or a little later. We were still up preparing for work. I stared at her, my skin going cold. You saw me leaving? Yeah. You looked so strange, like you weren't even awake. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you stop me? She just shrugged. That was the moment I realized, the strangest night of my life wasn't just a dream. It really happened. I don't remember walking through the door. I don't remember the cool night air brushing my skin or the sound of gravel beneath my bare feet. I don't remember crossing roads or dodging motorbikes or the way the neighborhood slowly disappeared behind me. But I do remember the moment I opened my eyes. It was early morning, probably around 6 a.m. The sky was still gray, caught in that strange hour between night and day. I was lying on my side, my head resting on something hard and cold. I blinked, feeling groggy, like I was trapped in a dream that wouldn't end. Then I sat up, and realized I was outside. Not outside my house. Somewhere else. I was lying next to a tree, on a patch of rough grass beside a concrete road. My head had been resting on a piece of stone, flat, dusty, and slightly warm from the fading night heat. There was a strange house in front of me. It was painted a dull green, and I had never seen it before in my life. I blinked again, trying to force my brain to wake up, but the world around me stayed the same. It wasn't just unfamiliar, it was completely unfamiliar. I didn't know the street. I didn't know the house. I didn't even know what direction I had come from. And that's when fear crept in. I stood up slowly. My legs were sore, like I'd been walking for a long time. My arms were scratched with tiny cuts, probably from brushing against bushes or branches in the dark. I looked down and saw dirt on my feet. Dry leaves stuck to my shirt. I had no idea where I was, but I knew I was far from home. Later, I'd figure out the truth. I had somehow traveled nearly 20 minutes away from my house, on foot, in the middle of the night. I had crossed at least 3 major roads. Busy roads. Dangerous ones. And I never remembered any of it. As I stood there, next to the tree and the stone that had been my pillow, the neighborhood around me began to wake up. The shutters of the greenhouse creaked open. Somewhere down the street, a rooster crowed. I started walking, still dazed, still unsure if I was awake or asleep. I didn't know which direction to go, but my feet seemed to know. Like muscle memory. I followed them blindly. The world felt thick, like I was moving through syrup. I saw people opening storefronts, sweeping sidewalks, but no one looked at me. I was just a sleep-stained shadow wandering through the edge of morning. I blinked again. I was standing across the road now. I hadn't remembered crossing it. My hands trembled. The sun was higher. My skin was warm. But I still felt cold inside. Then I blinked again, and the world jumped. Suddenly, I was standing in front of my house. Just like that. No memory of the walk. No memory of turning corners, of passing landmarks, of retracing my steps. Just one blink, and there I was. And that wasn't even the strangest part. Because when I looked up at the sky, I realized it wasn't early morning anymore. It was noon. Around 11:30 a.m., maybe later. Somehow, in the blink of an eye, 5 or 6 hours had vanished. Time had skipped. I felt like I had stepped out of reality and back in. Like I had left a dream. But brought something strange back with me. I walked up to the door and opened it. Inside, everything was quiet. The house was empty, my parents were already at work. The kitchen fan was still spinning lazily. A half-empty glass of water sat on the table. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal. And I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Because how could I explain it? I didn't even know what had happened to me. After that day, I didn't talk about it. Not to my parents. Not to my friends. Not even to myself. It was easier to pretend it hadn't happened. I convinced myself it was just a dream. A weird, intense dream. A sleepwalking episode, maybe. A fluke. My imagination. I was just a kid, after all. But every once in a while, something would remind me. A stone lying near a tree. A stretch of unfamiliar sidewalk. The sound of feet scraping pavement at night. I'd get a flash, brief, weightless, of that strange morning. That greenhouse. That eerie blink. That moment I was across the road, then suddenly at my front gate, with no memory of the hours in between. For years, it was just a whisper in the back of my mind. A mystery I didn't want to touch. Until I was about 16. I had stayed home from school that day. I was curled up on the couch, half asleep, scrolling through my phone while my mom folded laundry nearby. We weren't really talking. The TV murmured in the background. And then, out of nowhere, I asked. "Mom," I said, eyes still on my phone, "do you remember that time I sleepwalked?" She didn't even pause. "Which time?" I blinked. "You mean I've done it more than once?" She laughed gently, folding a shirt. "You used to walk in your sleep sometimes when you were little. Nothing serious. Just wandering out of your room. Sometimes into the kitchen." "Did I ever leave the house?" I asked, suddenly sitting up. This time, she paused. "Yeah," she said after a moment. "There was one time. You were maybe 9 or 10. I think it was during summer break." I stared at her. My chest tightened. "You remember that?" She nodded casually. "Your dad and I saw you. It was late. Maybe midnight. We were both still up, getting things ready for the next morning. We saw you open the front door and just walk out." I sat there frozen. "You saw me leave?" "Yeah," she repeated, like it was no big deal. I tried to laugh. "So why didn't you stop me?" And that's when she really looked at me, finally catching something in my voice. Something off. "I don't know," she said slowly. "I think we just didn't think it was serious. We figured you'd come back. You let me walk out into the night," I said, louder now. She frowned, suddenly uncomfortable. "You weren't far. I think we thought you were just going into the yard. Maybe you'd turn around." I woke up in front of a house I didn't recognize, I told her, heart pounding. I was 20 minutes away. I crossed roads. I was next to a tree with my head on a stone. I don't remember anything. And I didn't come back until it was almost noon. My mom didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Wait. It was noon?" I nodded. I don't remember walking home. I just blinked, and I was there. Blinked again, and it was hours later. Her face had gone pale. "I didn't know that," she whispered. "We thought you came back right after." We thought you were in bed the whole time. And then she added something that chilled me. We checked your room the next morning. You were asleep. The door was locked. We didn't know anything had happened. I stared at her, every hair on my arm standing on end. Locked? But I had been outside. Far away. At dawn. Then at noon. And the front door, the one I walked through, wasn't broken, and it hadn't been unlocked. My room was locked from the inside. I had no key. I hadn't even known how to lock it back then. Maybe it was a dream, she muttered, folding a towel without looking at me. It wasn't, I whispered. We didn't talk about it after that. But that night, I barely slept. I kept imagining myself at 9 years old, barefoot in the dark, walking across intersections, brushing past motorcycles and strangers, blank-eyed and silent. No protection. No memory. And something even more terrifying, the hours that vanished. The way I blinked and changed locations. The jump in time. As if something, or someone, had been moving me. Like I wasn't in control at all. After talking to my mom, something changed in me. The memory, once blurry and half-buried, sharpened like a photo pulled into focus. And now that I knew it had really happened, that I hadn't just imagined it, it started haunting me again. But this time, I couldn't let it go. I started thinking about it constantly. At school. On the bus. Before I fell asleep. I'd find myself staring at the ceiling, retracing steps I didn't remember taking. I'd Google sleepwalking cases, read Reddit threads about people waking up miles away, alone, scared. But nothing I read explained the time skip. No one talked about blinking and suddenly being somewhere else. No one said anything about walking for hours and waking up in your own bed with the door locked from the inside. I tried to be logical. I told myself maybe I was just lost and confused. Maybe my memory was playing tricks on me. I was only 10, right? But the more I thought about it, the more the gap screamed back at me, and then came the dreams. At first, they were vague, walking down long roads in the dark, hearing footsteps behind me that never got closer. Trees that looked familiar and wrong at the same time. A greenhouse I couldn't enter, even when I knocked. Then they became more vivid. In one dream, I stood in front of that same tree, the one where I woke up, with my head resting on the stone again. Only this time, I was watching myself. My body lay there, eyes closed, chest barely rising. Something stood next to me. I couldn't see it clearly, just a shape, tall and still, with no face. It didn't move. It didn't speak. It just watched me sleep. I always woke up sweating. Eventually, I started avoiding sleep. I stayed up reading theories, scrolling through obscure forums. I found stories from people who said they'd been taken not kidnapped by people, but by something else. Strange lights. Disappearances. Missing time. Waking up with cuts they couldn't explain. Some believed it was aliens. Others said spirits. One person even claimed their sleepwalking had been manipulated by something non-human, something that used their body while they weren't home in it. I didn't know what to believe. But one thing kept echoing in my head. What if I hadn't just sleepwalked? What if I had been guided? The thought chilled me. What scared me more wasn't what I remembered, it was what I didn't. Those missing hours. The walk back that never happened. The locked door. The idea that something else had stepped in, filled the gaps, placed me where I was supposed to be. Back in bed. Tucked in. Returned. Like an object borrowed and quietly dropped back into place. I started asking more questions, quietly, carefully. I asked neighbors if they'd seen me that night, but most said no. One old man who lived a few houses down blinked when I asked, then said, "I thought I saw something that night. Someone walking slowly." But they weren't. Normal. When I asked what he meant, he just shook his head. They didn't walk like a child. They floated. That word sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't tell him anything else. I just nodded and walked away. Back at home, I pulled out old family photos from the time. In one, taken just a few weeks before the incident, I looked happy, standing in the yard with my parents, smiling, the sun on my face. But when I stared at the photo long enough, my smile began to feel fake. Like the kid in the picture was already slipping away. Was it possible to leave your body and come back different? I didn't have the answer. But I couldn't shake the feeling that a part of me hadn't come back that night. Or worse. Something else came back with me. Years have passed since that night. I've grown older, Moved towns, made new friends, started working. From the outside, I look like anyone else. No one would ever guess that I once woke up with my head on a stone, outside a stranger's house, with 5 hours of my life missing and no memory of how I got there. I don't bring it up often. People laugh off sleepwalking stories. They say, "Oh, I used to do that too," or "That's nothing, my cousin once woke up in a field." They don't know what it's like to truly lose time. To be moved like a pawn on a board you can't see. To blink and lose half a day. To come home without knowing how. Sometimes, I still have dreams about that night. I see the greenhouse, standing silently across from the tree. Sometimes I'm looking through the windows. Sometimes I'm inside. And every time, the same thing happens. I wake up with the feeling that something watched me while I was gone. I've stopped looking for answers. At least, the kind you can find on a website or in a textbook. No one can tell me why my room was locked from the inside when I didn't remember coming back. Or how I crossed 3 or 4 roads in the middle of the night in Vietnam, a place where even crossing during the day can be dangerous, and wasn't hit, wasn't seen, wasn't stopped. And no one can explain the way time jumped. How I blinked and it was noon. Like someone, or something, put me back. Sometimes I wonder, what if I hadn't come back? What if something had interfered? What if the world glitched and I slipped through for a while? Not far. Just long enough for something to follow me back. That's the thought that lingers. Not just where I went, but what came back with me. Because sometimes, I don't feel entirely the same. It's small things. Like how I wake up in the middle of the night and feel like I've just returned from somewhere. Or how, occasionally, I'll find dirt on the soles of my feet in the morning, dirt I can't explain. Or how sometimes I stand near my front door late at night and feel drawn to it. Like I've done it before. Like I've stood there, half asleep, waiting for something to guide me again. I've never told anyone that part. Not even my mom, especially not my mom. Because even after all these years, I still think about what she said, that she saw me leave and didn't stop me. That they watched me walk away. And I can't help but wonder. What if she couldn't stop me? What if that night, I wasn't mine? There's no neat ending to this story. No answer. Just the memory of waking up under a tree beside a stone, in front of a house that wasn't mine, with a whole world of time erased from my mind. It stays with me like a second shadow. And maybe that's all this is, a shadow of something bigger than I'll ever understand. A moment I brushed up against the edge of something strange and quiet and terrifying. And somehow, it let me go. But not before leaving something behind. Something I still feel. When the world is silent. When the road outside is empty. When I blink, and everything feels just a little bit off. Sometimes I wonder if that night changed me permanently. Not in a dramatic, horror movie kind of way, no alien mark, no ghost in the mirror. Just subtle things. The kind you can ignore during the day, but that creep back in once the lights go off. Like the way I now lock every door twice. Or how I check the windows 3 times before bed. Or how I wake up sometimes in the early hours, around 2:47 a.m., to be exact, heart pounding, even if I didn't dream anything. Just alert. Like something's near. My logical brain tells me it was sleepwalking. An anomaly. A glitch in my growing brain. Maybe a blackout, maybe trauma I forgot, maybe just bad sleep hygiene and coincidence. But deep down, something in me knows better. I never truly returned from that night the same. Not completely. Sometimes when I pass that greenhouse on the far side of the district, the one I finally found again by accident years later, I feel something deep in my chest. Not fear, exactly. Not dread either. It's recognition. I know this house. It's quiet. The same dull paint. Same tree. Same cracked sidewalk. There's a stone beside the roots, still there after all these years, half buried in weeds. I've stood across the street from it, watching. Not going closer. Never knocking. One time, I saw a curtain move. But no one came to the window. That's when I started keeping a journal. Not for dreams, but for blinks. Times when the world skips. When I'm in one room, then suddenly another. When I lose an hour and can't explain where it went. It doesn't happen often. But often enough. There was one entry I wrote last year that still scares me. February 12th, 2:46 a.m. Woke up standing in the hallway. Front door slightly open. My feet were dirty. A single word drawn in the dust outside the doorstep. Welcome. I don't remember writing it. But it's in my handwriting. That's the thing about these stories, the real ones. They don't wrap up in a clean ending. They stay with you. Like soft footsteps just behind your own. Like a locked door you swear was open 5 minutes ago. People laugh when I mention sleepwalking now. I laugh too. But sometimes, just sometimes, on quiet nights, I place my hand on the doorknob and wait. I listen. And I wonder. If that door opens again. Will it be me that walks out? Or something else? I told myself it was over. That whatever happened that night, whatever took me out of my house and into that strange silence, it was a one-time thing. A childhood anomaly. A crack in the universe I accidentally slipped through. But lately, I've started to think the door never really closed. It only stopped moving for a while. Last month, I stayed the night at my childhood home. My parents had gone out of town, and I'd agreed to house sit for a few days. I hadn't slept in that room for years. Not since I moved away. Not since I became the kind of adult who locks every window and pretends they don't check over their shoulder twice before entering a dark hallway. I brought my laptop, some work, and tried to laugh off the nerves. But the moment I walked in, I felt it. Stillness. Like the walls remembered me. Like the floorboards recognized my footsteps. That night, I went to bed around midnight. I locked the front door. I checked the windows. I even left a night light on in the hallway. Just in case. At 2:43 a.m., I woke up. Fully awake. No noise. No nightmare. Just awareness. I sat up in bed, heart calm, mind alert. I didn't feel scared. Not yet. Until I heard the creak. Soft. Slow. The unmistakable sound of the front door opening. Not slamming. Not being forced. Just opening. I froze. Part of me said, it's the wind. But the air was still. The curtains didn't even move. Then I heard it. The lightest shuffle of bare feet across tile. Slow. Wandering. Familiar. And suddenly I knew, I wasn't hearing someone else. I was hearing me. Like an echo of the past, I stood up and moved toward the hallway. The light I left on had gone out. The switch wouldn't work. I stood in the dark, staring at the front door. It was wide open. But no one was there. No wind. No movement. No sound. Just the night. I didn't remember opening it. But I didn't remember closing it either. I shut it. Locked it. Turned around, and stopped. There, in the hallway, written faintly in chalk across the wooden floorboards, was a word I didn't understand. I stared at it, the letters crude and uneven, like drawn by a child, or something trying to copy one. When I blinked, it was gone. Just wood again. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing. Eventually, I went back to bed. I didn't sleep. But the next morning, the strangest part wasn't the word, or the open door, or the silence. It was the dirt. On my feet. And the pine needles tangled in my hair. I hadn't stepped outside. At least, I didn't remember doing it. I don't tell anyone this anymore. Not my friends. Not my family. Definitely not strangers. Because at some point, people stop asking what happened. And they start asking what's wrong with you. But I know what I felt that night. I know what I saw. I know what I've seen for years. The truth is, I think I've been opening that door more than I realize. In sleep. In silence. In some state between. And I think something is waiting on the other side. Not to hurt me. Not even to scare me. But to remind me of one thing. That I was never supposed to come back alone. Story 4, she pretended to be the perfect mom, until I revealed her secret affair. I always thought I knew Margaret, my so-called mother-in-law married into our life with impeccable manners and that perfect, poised smile that never faltered. She was David's mother, after all, and I loved David. But I'd soon learn how dangerous knowing someone can be. At first, Margaret was just intense. She insisted on reviewing our grocery lists, muttering about our frivolous purchases, organic avocados, imported tea, that designer lamp I'd loved in our living room. She'd whisper in David's ear, "Are you sure she can handle this? Or we should be more careful with our finances." At the time, I thought she simply cared. Now I know it was calculated. We lived in a modest home in the suburbs, a 2-story brick house with ivy creeping up one side, a white picket fence, and roses that bloomed every spring. But little cracks were already forming in our foundation. Like the morning I discovered the first hint of betrayal. It was late afternoon, golden sunlight filtered through lace curtains. I'd been working on my laptop when I noticed it, Margaret's silhouette behind me, huddled over an open spreadsheet on my screen labeled Joint Savings. My heart hammered. I closed the lid sharply. "Mom? What are you doing?" She looked up, startled, her expression a careful mask of innocence. "Just checking things for our vacation fund," she lied smoothly, her fingers still resting on the keypad. "David and I thought it would be nice if we all contributed." I swallowed, staring at her eyes. She was lying. I felt it in every fiber of my being, and for the first time, I realized she didn't see me as family. She saw me as a threat. That evening I confronted David. He looked stunned. "Mom said she was helping," he murmured, glancing at his phone for comfort. I watched him, torn between doubt and loyalty, before nodding and walking away, my mind already racing. And then life hit me like a freight train. 2 days later, I was called into HR. "Economic downturn," they said, handing me a severance package and a pat on the back. I walked out of that glass-door office shaking, heart pounding, blood drained. My professional identity, my financial independence, gone in an instant. That same night, I watched as Margaret circled the dinner table, hovering by David, planting seeds of doubt. She gently said, "Maybe you should take a break from her messiness. She can't manage a budget. What if she hasn't been honest for a while?" Her words slithered into his mind like snake venom. From that moment on, I felt a slipping. David became distant, texts unanswered, hugs avoided, conversations cold and clipped. It was like he was ashamed, embarrassed. So I decided to fight back. Before anger took me, I took action. Late one night, I opened Margaret's email on her unlocked laptop. She'd left it beside the sofa, windowed browser, unread messages glaring. I barely slept that night, sifting through files and folders, conversations and bank statements. What I found chilled me. A string of flirtatious texts to a gym trainer, "Can't wait to see you tonight." Receipts for lavish dinners and hotel stays paid from a secret credit card under her name. A detailed spreadsheet showing siphoned funds from our combined savings, unaccounted expenses going into her account. Emails between her and her lawyer fiancé, yes, fiancé, planning to move in with him once she'd extracted just enough from me. She wasn't just betraying her husband. She'd been quietly conning me, controlling David, and constructing a fortress of lies. My head spun. My heart burned. Betrayal lanced through me like acid. In that moment, I realized I had two choices: let her continue, or fight back. I chose to fight. That winter night, I gathered everything: screenshots, statements, emails, receipts. I saved them all into a folder labeled Truth. My hands shook, but my jaw was steady. Because I realized, I was no longer a victim. I was the guardian of my own story. After that night, everything shifted. David no longer looked at me the same way. His glances were hollow, distracted. His touch felt more like a formality than affection. He was slipping through my fingers, and I could feel Margaret tightening her grip on him with every passing day. She became more involved in our lives than ever before. Suddenly, she was always around. Offering to help with chores, suggesting weekly financial reviews, dropping subtle hints that maybe we were living beyond our means. It was all cloaked in smiles and false concern, but underneath it, I could feel the manipulation tightening like a vice. And David listened. He began to parrot her ideas back to me. Maybe we should pause our plans to buy a new car. Maybe I should look for a part-time job, just to stay productive. Maybe I should let Margaret handle the bills while I focused on finding work. Each maybe chipped away at me, another crack in the foundation she had started to break. But I stayed quiet. At least on the outside. Inside, I was planning. Every night, after David fell asleep, I turned into a detective. I started with her phone, which she carelessly left in the kitchen to charge overnight. She had no passcode, something I thought was odd for someone so private. Or maybe she thought she was untouchable. I began to dig. I read through her messages. Some were normal, talks with friends, shopping lists, reminders. But hidden deeper were messages that made my stomach twist. Texts to a man named Eric. Flirty. Personal. Intimate. Things like, "You look so good this morning. I wish I was coming home to you instead. Soon it will all be ours? Ours?" What was ours? And who was Eric? I searched her contacts. Eric was saved without a last name, but I found a photo. He was tall, muscular, wearing a gym shirt. Trainer, maybe. I checked her browsing history next and found even more: hotel confirmations, restaurant reservations, flower orders. None of them listed under her husband's name. Her affair was no longer a suspicion. It was fact. Still, I needed more. So I kept digging. One day, when Margaret was out for errands, I went through her purse. My hands trembled the entire time. I hated what I was doing, but I had to know. Inside, I found a bank card I had never seen before. Not one connected to our shared household accounts. It belonged to an entirely different bank. I took a photo of the card number and later that night, I used it to look up the bank's customer portal. After a few failed attempts, I guessed her security question. It was David's birthday. There it was. Tens of thousands in savings. Money that had clearly been moved from our account over several months. Small withdrawals that added up to large amounts. She was stealing from us. From me. And there were transfers too. Several of them going to someone named E. Harper. Eric Harper. I sat there in the dark, staring at the screen, feeling like the floor beneath me had collapsed. This woman had smiled at me, called me daughter, and played the role of supportive mother-in-law. But she had been draining our savings, cheating on her husband, and scheming behind our backs with another man. I saved everything. Screenshots. Statements. Text messages. Photos. I organized it into folders. Labeled everything by date. Then I did something even bolder. I placed a small recording device in the living room, hidden behind the bookshelf. I needed to hear what she said when I was not around. I wanted her words, her tone, her true self. Over the next week, I listened to hours of recordings. Some of it was casual conversation. But one night, I heard her say something that made my blood run cold. She told David, "She will ruin you if you are not careful. She is not the kind of woman you marry. She is the kind you survive." That was the moment I stopped hoping things would fix themselves. It was war now. But this time, I was not the one being fooled. It was a Wednesday evening when everything inside me finally broke. David and I had barely spoken all week. Every attempt I made to connect with him was met with silence, a distracted nod, or the hollow phrase, "I'm just tired." But I knew the truth. He wasn't tired. He was poisoned, slowly, deliberately, by Margaret's carefully chosen words. That night, we had dinner with Margaret. She had made her usual roast chicken, paired with wine she insisted came from her personal collection. I sat quietly, smiling where I had to, nodding where expected. But inside, I was burning. As she passed the salad bowl, she looked directly at me and said, "Maybe it's time you think about contributing to the household again. You've had quite a long break, haven't you?" David didn't even look up. He just kept cutting his meat, as if she had said something completely reasonable. That was it. That was the moment. I looked her in the eye and gave a calm, deliberate smile. "You were right, Margaret. I think it's time I did something." She smiled back, clearly proud of herself, thinking she had won. But she had no idea what I was preparing behind the scenes. The next morning, I took the day off from job searching and instead spent it organizing every piece of evidence I had collected. I printed out email chains, arranged screenshots, highlighted financial transfers, and labeled every folder with a timeline. I created a master binder. Neat. Professional. Bulletproof. But that wasn't enough. I needed to be strategic. If I made one wrong move, she could twist the narrative, cry victim, and convince David that I was the villain. I couldn't let that happen. Not after everything. So I waited. I kept smiling. I played the part of the grateful daughter-in-law, asking Margaret for recipes and complimenting her on her home decor. I laughed at her jokes, even when they stung. I was patient. Quiet. Watching. And then, the perfect opportunity came. David's birthday. Margaret had insisted on hosting the family celebration at our home. There would be wine, cake, music, and everyone we knew, siblings, cousins, friends, neighbors. The whole house would be full of people who had been told her version of the story for years. The perfect audience for the truth. I spent the day pretending everything was fine. I cleaned the house, baked a cake, and smiled like I was hosting the happiest day of my life. But in my bedroom closet, tucked into a nondescript tote bag, was the binder. The truth. As the guests arrived, I watched Margaret float through the room like a queen. Her hair perfectly done, her dress elegant and expensive, her voice warm and sugary as she charmed everyone. She even hugged me in front of a group of guests and whispered, "Let's try to make tonight about David, okay?" I smiled. Of course. The party began. Music played, people laughed, and David beamed in the middle of it all, his smile real for the first time in weeks. I almost hesitated. I almost let it go. But then I saw Margaret slip her hand into David's coat pocket, pull out his phone, and type something. Sneaky. Secretive. Controlling. That was all the reminder I needed. It was time. I stood up, walked to the center of the room, and called everyone's attention. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "I know this is David's birthday," I said. "But there's something I need to share. Something that's been happening for months. Something none of you would ever believe unless I showed you." The room went still. Margaret froze. David turned to me, confused. And I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder. The room was silent. Every eye turned to me as I held the binder in my hands. My fingers trembled slightly, but I kept my voice steady. I looked at David first. His brows were drawn in confusion, concern. He had no idea what was coming. Neither did anyone else. But Margaret knew. She stood frozen near the fireplace, one hand wrapped around a wine glass, the other clenched tightly at her side. Her smile had vanished. Her carefully constructed mask was starting to slip. I cleared my throat and began. For the last few months, I have been accused of being irresponsible, of being a financial burden, of being someone who could not be trusted. I let those words hang in the air. And for months, I stayed quiet. I let someone stand in this house, in my life, and tear me apart from the inside. But I am not here to play the victim. I am here to show you the truth. I opened the binder and turned to the first page. "Bank statements," I said. "Showing transfers from our joint savings account into an account belonging to Margaret. These started small. $50 here, $100 there. But they added up. Thousands over time. Quietly moved without explanation." I flipped to the next section. "Messages," I continued, lifting printed pages for everyone to see. "Between Margaret and someone named Eric. Personal. Intimate. Romantic. Plans made in secret. Dinners, hotels, private gifts. This affair has been going on for months, while she stood in this house and called herself a loyal wife and mother." The room shifted. Gasps. Whispers. Someone dropped a fork onto a plate with a loud clang. I went on. Emails to her lawyer. Discussions about her financial plans. Plans that did not include her husband. Or this family. Only herself, and Eric. Margaret stepped forward, her voice shaking. "This is ridiculous. Those are fake. You are bitter and angry and clearly unstable." I turned a page. "This is a hotel receipt," I said calmly. "Paid with her personal card. On a night she told everyone she was at a charity meeting." I looked at David. He had not moved. His face was pale, blank, eyes staring down at the binder. "Margaret told you I was the problem," I said, my voice soft now. "She said I was holding you back. That I could not support you. That I was using you. But all the while, she was the one taking what was not hers. She was the one lying." The silence was crushing. Then David finally spoke. "Is it true?" he asked, barely above a whisper. He looked at Margaret, his voice breaking. "All of it?" Margaret did not answer. She looked around the room, at the shocked faces, the quiet judgment. She knew it was over. So she did what people like her always do when caught. She attacked. "This is what she wanted," Margaret snapped. "She wants to ruin me. She is jealous. She is manipulative. I was only trying to protect you from her." But no one believed her. The proof was too clear. The lies were too deep. And I had spoken calmly, truthfully, with no need for theatrics. The evidence had spoken louder than her accusations. David took a step back from his mother. His jaw clenched. His eyes welled with something between grief and disgust. "You lied to all of us," he said quietly. "You lied to me." Margaret opened her mouth again, but no one listened. The celebration was over. Family members stood slowly, unsure what to say. Some shook their heads. Others simply walked away in silence. The truth had cracked through the perfect image she spent years building, and now it was all falling apart. As the room emptied, Margaret stood alone by the fireplace. Still. Cold. Defeated. I did not feel joy. I felt something stronger. Relief. The house felt different after everyone left. It was the same space, the same furniture, the same warm light from the kitchen, but everything felt colder. Quieter. As if the walls themselves were still trying to process what they had heard. Margaret had disappeared into the guest room. She slammed the door behind her and never came out again that night. David sat on the couch for a long time, staring at nothing. His face was pale, and his eyes had lost that spark I used to know so well. I sat across from him, waiting. After what felt like an hour, he finally spoke. "I don't know what to say," he said. His voice was flat, tired. "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "Just tell me you believe me." He looked up. "I do." And that was all I needed to hear. But believing me did not undo what had been done. The damage was deep, and not just financial. Margaret had built a wall between us, brick by brick, until we were strangers sitting in the same room. I had tried to break through it quietly. Now, I had torn it down completely. In the days that followed, the silence grew heavy. Margaret packed her things and left without saying goodbye. David did not stop her. He barely spoke to her at all. The truth had hit him harder than I expected. He was not just grieving his mother. He was grieving the lie he had called a family. One morning, I found him on the porch with his head in his hands. "I feel like a fool," he whispered. "You are not," I said. "You were lied to. Over and over. That is not your fault." He nodded slowly, but I could tell it would take time for him to forgive himself. As for me, I had my own healing to do. I found a new job 2 weeks later. It was not glamorous, but it paid the bills. More importantly, it gave me something Margaret had slowly tried to take from me, my independence. I changed the passwords on our accounts. Closed the joint savings and opened one in my name. I set boundaries, not just with David, but with everyone who had once doubted me. No more quiet suffering. No more letting things slide. I started going to therapy. At first, I thought it was unnecessary. But it helped. It helped me realize how long I had been ignoring my own instincts. How I had allowed myself to shrink, just to make others more comfortable. Margaret taught me many things, but not in the way she intended. She taught me that family can be the ones who smile the most while hiding a knife behind their back. She taught me that not everyone who claims to protect you actually wants what is best for you. And she taught me that silence is the sharpest weapon of all. But I had broken that silence. And in doing so, I had reclaimed something priceless. My voice. David and I did not break up. But we were not the same. We had to rebuild from the ground up. Trust had to be earned again. And for the first time, he truly saw me, not just as the woman he married, but as a person who had fought to protect everything they had built. I do not know where Margaret went. I heard through a cousin that she moved in with someone new, possibly the same man from the emails. I did not ask. I did not care. She had taken enough from me already. In the end, this is not a story about revenge. It is a story about truth. It is about what happens when someone pushes you so far into a corner that you either break or rise. I chose to rise. And for the first time in a long time, I am no longer afraid. Months have passed since that night. The house is quieter now, not from tension, but from peace. No more whispered accusations behind my back. No more watching over my shoulder. No more pretending everything is fine while slowly unraveling inside. I wake up before the sun sometimes. Not out of fear, but out of habit. For so long, my mind was trained to stay alert, to stay ahead. When you live under subtle manipulation, your body learns to survive even when your heart is exhausted. But now, I am learning how to live again, not just survive. David and I are still together, but we are different people now. We talk more. Really talk. About our fears. About what we missed. About how easy it was to let someone else define the rhythm of our life. He regrets not seeing it sooner. I regret not standing up for myself faster. But we have stopped punishing ourselves for it. We both carry scars. His are emotional, betrayal by the one person he believed would never lie to him. Mine are both emotional and invisible, wounds from years of walking on eggshells, pretending, holding in every scream I wanted to release. I still keep the binder tucked in the bottom drawer of my desk. Not because I need it now, but because it reminds me of who I became when no one believed me. Of how I fought back when I was expected to stay quiet. That binder holds more than proof, it holds power. And I never plan to give that up again. Sometimes, I get messages from people who were there that night. Cousins. Aunts. Friends who said nothing at the time but later admitted they always had a strange feeling about Margaret. They apologize for not speaking up sooner. For standing on the sidelines. I do not hold it against them. Because I have learned this, truth is not always loud. Sometimes it comes in whispers. In doubt. In questions you are too afraid to ask. Until someone finally stands up and lays it bare. That was me. And it changed everything. David no longer calls Margaret. He has not blocked her, but the conversations are few and distant. She tried to explain herself once, sent a letter filled with half-truths and justifications. He read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in a drawer he never opens. He says it hurts less that way. I believe him. Some wounds never fully close, but you learn how to move forward without reopening them. That is healing. As for Margaret, she lives elsewhere now. I do not know if she is still with Eric or if she found someone new to manipulate. Maybe she is living the life she always wanted. Maybe she finally ran out of people to fool. It no longer matters. She is no longer my shadow. I look in the mirror now and see someone I respect. Someone who fought for her truth, even when it meant losing people. Even when it meant standing alone. And I would do it all again if I had to. Because once you find your voice, you never let it go. Story 5, The Edge of Reality, Strange Moments That Changed How I See Sanity. It was the summer of 1969, and in our small town, nobody called ahead before visiting. If you wanted to hang out with a friend, you just walked over and knocked. That afternoon, the sun was low, heat shimmering on the sidewalks. I'd spent the morning at the creek and decided to see if my friend Mark was home. I knocked on the door, expecting the usual, his sneakers slapping against the hallway floor, a grin as he opened it. But it wasn't Mark who answered. It was his mother. She stood in the doorway, barefoot, wearing a thin, patterned house dress. Her expression was neutral at first, but her eyes didn't quite land on me, they drifted, as if searching the air for something invisible. Her hair was disheveled, not the neat curls I remembered. And just above her forehead, at the hairline, was an open sore. Red. Raw. Angry looking. She kept touching it, almost absent-mindedly, as if it were a worry stone etched into her own skin. "Mark's not home," she said flatly. "He went to the store for milk." I nodded, ready to leave. But then she started talking. Not small talk, not even normal conversation. It started with something about the smog. How it wasn't just bad for the lungs, but for the ground. Smog, she said, is triggering earthquakes. In Vietnam. She said it like it was a fact she'd read in the paper, something undeniable. She went on without taking a breath, jumping between topics with the same wild certainty. Reagan was involved, he was governor then, and in her mind, he was manipulating the atmosphere. Pollution was mind control. The war in Vietnam wasn't just political, it was environmental sabotage. Her voice was flat at times, almost like she was reading from a broken teleprompter, then suddenly rising with passion over some twist of conspiracy. All the while, she picked at the sore on her head. Fingernails scratching gently at it. Digging. Wiping the blood on her palm, then continuing, as if she didn't even notice she was doing it. I stood there, frozen. I didn't know if I should interrupt her, or back away slowly. I'd never seen anyone like that before. Not just confused, disconnected. Like a radio caught between stations. Her words made no sense, but the emotion behind them was real. Fear. Anger. Paranoia. She wasn't making conversation. She was unraveling in front of me. And I realized something terrifying, there was no way to get through to her. She wasn't looking for a response. She wasn't even talking to me anymore. She was caught in her own loop of truth, and I was just standing there, watching her spin deeper into it. After a few minutes, I made an excuse and left. She didn't say goodbye. She just kept talking as I backed away from the porch. I walked home in silence, the sound of her voice still echoing in my ears. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, trying to piece together what I'd seen. It was my first real encounter with someone who had lost touch with reality, and it stayed with me. Not just because it was strange, but because it was so fragile. Like watching glass crack, and knowing you couldn't stop it from shattering. Years later, I worked the front desk at a small-town hotel, nothing fancy, Just 2 stories and a neon sign that flickered when it rained. Most guests were quiet, passing through town for a night or two. But sometimes, someone would check in who didn't quite seem to belong in the same reality as the rest of us. One evening, a man came in around dusk with a small suitcase in one hand and a cat carrier in the other. He was polite, a little twitchy, but nothing too unusual. He asked if pets were allowed. We normally said no, but I made an exception. "I don't go anywhere without her," he said, glancing down at the carrier. Inside, a scrawny gray tabby blinked at me with huge eyes. I gave him a room on the second floor and thought nothing more of it. A few hours later, the front desk phone rang. It was him. "There's something wrong with the walls," he said, voice shaky. I offered to come up and take a look. When I knocked on his door, he opened it just wide enough for one eye to peek through. After a long pause, he let me in. The room was dark. The curtains were drawn, the lights off except for a bedside lamp. And in his hand was a stud finder, a small electronic tool used to detect the wooden beams inside walls. It was beeping. He held it up to the wall and looked at me, dead serious. "They're tracking me." I didn't know what to say. He walked to the other side of the room and pressed the device to another wall. "Beep. You hear that?" he said. "It reacts when they watch." I nodded slowly, trying not to escalate anything. He moved toward the cat, who sat calmly on the bed. He pressed the device to her side. Beep. His face changed, not panic, but a grim kind of certainty. "They got to her too," he said. Then he turned back to me. His eyes locked onto mine. "I know who you're working with. Detective R_. Narcotics. Local guy. You probably know him." I didn't. Never heard the name. "I can't stay here," he said, calmer now. "It's not safe. You're not safe either, you know." I didn't argue. I offered a refund. He accepted it without protest, packed up his things, and left less than 10 minutes later. The next morning, the room was empty. No damage. Just an open window, the curtain swaying in the breeze, and a faint imprint on the bedspread where the cat had been. I never saw him again. But for weeks after that, I kept thinking about that moment, how convinced he was. How tightly he clung to a reality where the world was closing in and the only one he could trust was his cat. Until even that wasn't certain anymore. It didn't feel like madness. It felt like fear that had grown teeth. Like something invisible chasing him through every room, every conversation, every second. And part of me wondered, what if, in his world, he was right? In 1975, I was living in a big, creaky house just off the highway with 3 roommates. It was one of those shared living arrangements that worked, barely. Dishes piled up, music was always playing from somebody's room, and friends of friends drifted in and out like ghosts. You never knew who'd be sitting in the kitchen at 2 a.m., but it was home, for a time. One night, a friend of my roommate came by. I didn't know her, and I didn't ask too many questions. That was how it worked, you didn't pry. She was in her mid-20s, with sunken eyes, wearing a threadbare coat even though it was warm outside. Her hair was wild, her movements restless, twitchy. There was something not quite right about the way she looked around the room, like everything was both too bright and not real enough. She barely spoke at first. Just muttered things under her breath. Then later, when we were all sitting in the living room, she stood up out of nowhere and said, "I am Jesus." We all laughed. Nervously. Thought it was some kind of joke. But she wasn't laughing. She stared at us, wide-eyed, trembling, but convinced. "You are all here because I need to gather the faithful," she said. "This house is my temple. I was sent here. I'm not leaving until it's done." We didn't know what to do. No one wanted to be rude, especially if she was going through something. But it quickly became clear that this wasn't a phase or a prank. She truly believed it. She stopped eating our food and started lighting matches and whispering over them like candles. She scribbled in notebooks for hours, saying she was rewriting the corrected Gospels. She taped drawings to the windows to repel the government agents. She stopped sleeping, stopped bathing, just walked the halls and talked to herself. And then, she turned on me. "You," she said one night in the hallway, "you were Judas." I had just come out of the bathroom. It was 2 a.m. "What?" I asked. "I knew it the moment I saw you. You're here to betray me." I laughed, tried to brush it off, but the look in her eyes made my stomach turn. She wasn't joking. She truly believed I was the one who would end her mission. The paranoia zeroed in on me, And after that, she followed me everywhere I went in the house, watching me from the staircase, whispering when I left a room. Then came the night I woke up to find her standing in the doorway of my room. Just standing there, hands at her sides, staring. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. That was the final straw. The next morning, I called the police. I hated myself for it, but I didn't know what else to do. She had stopped taking her medication, escaped from a mental health facility days before showing up. No one had reported her because no one knew where she had gone. When they arrived, she didn't fight. But as they led her away in cuffs, she looked right at me and said, "You were always going to betray me. You've done it before. You'll do it again." The words didn't leave me for weeks. Even though I knew she was sick, even though I knew she wasn't really talking to me, something about it pierced straight through. I realized in that moment just how fragile the line is between a stranger and someone who decides you're the villain in their story. By the time I was in my late 20s, I had already seen too many people unravel. At first, those moments felt like isolated storms, passing and strange. But after the third or fourth time, I started to feel a weight settle in my chest, like I was collecting pieces of other people's broken realities without even meaning to. It changed the way I looked at people. At conversations. At silence. You start to wonder, how many people are just barely holding it together? How many of us walk through the day balancing on a wire, smiling at checkout clerks and replying to emails while something inside pulls and cracks? After that incident with the woman who believed she was Jesus, after she looked me in the eyes and called me Judas, I didn't just feel fear. I felt something else. Something harder to name. A kind of sorrow. Because as much as her words frightened me, there was something tragic about her certainty. She was so sure. So convinced of her role in something divine. And it made me think, what if she needed to believe that? What if believing she was chosen gave her a reason to exist, a reason to keep going? And what if reality simply took too much from her to face? I began noticing things in other people, too. The way a stranger on the bus would mutter and smile to no one. The man who stood on the same corner every afternoon, preaching to a crowd that wasn't there. Even in my own friends, their quiet spirals when life got too hard. The long silences on the phone. The laughing that came just a little too fast. One night, I sat in my room with the lights off and thought about all of them. Mark's mother with her bleeding forehead and twisted theories, the man with the cat and his blinking stud finder, the woman in the hallway who thought I'd betray her. I could still hear all their voices. Still see the look in their eyes when reality broke open and something else slipped in. I thought about how helpless I had felt in every one of those moments. About how useless words became when someone truly believed you were part of their fear. And then I thought, what if it were me? What if one day, I opened my eyes and things didn't line up anymore? What if the walls of my world bent just slightly, and everyone else kept insisting they were straight? Who would I become then? The thought unsettled me more than any of those encounters had. Because I realized that the only thing separating me from any of them was chance. A chemical imbalance. A trauma I hadn't experienced. A crack I hadn't yet stepped on. Sanity, I learned, isn't a fortress. It's a balance. And some people, they just slip. There's something about looking into the eyes of a person who's completely lost touch with reality that never leaves you. It carves into your memory in a strange, quiet way, not like trauma exactly, but like a shadow that never changes position. I used to think sanity was something we were born with, something that stayed unless something big knocked it loose. But after everything I saw, those strange conversations, the beeping stud finder, the prophecy in the hallway, I began to understand how thin that line really is. It's not a fortress. It's a pane of glass. Sometimes thick. Sometimes hairline thin. And I've seen what happens when it cracks. The woman at the door, picking at her forehead while telling me that pollution caused earthquakes in Vietnam, she was someone's mother. Probably had favorite songs, recipes, moments of laughter. But something inside her turned, and suddenly the world rearranged itself into something terrifying. The hotel guest who believed I was tracking him with a stud finder, he wasn't trying to be strange. He was trying to survive in a world that made no sense to him. He wasn't delusional to himself. To him, I was the threat. And the woman who believed she was Jesus? Maybe she was trying to make sense of pain so massive, so consuming, that the only way forward was to become holy. Maybe believing in divine purpose was safer than facing whatever reality she ran from. People always ask why I didn't try harder to help. But what do you do when help is a word that means nothing to someone anymore? When comfort sounds like conspiracy? When reason feels like betrayal? Sometimes, the best thing you can do is be kind, and then step away before their world pulls you into it. And that's the truth no one wants to talk about. We're all just a few wrong turns away from being misunderstood, feared, or ignored. A few sleepless nights. A heartbreak that hits too deep. A silence that lingers a little too long. We like to think we'd never break. That we'd never slip. But reality is heavy. And not everyone can carry it the same way. I don't tell these stories to scare people. I tell them because they taught me something. That fear wears many faces. Sometimes it's paranoia. Sometimes it's certainty. Sometimes it's a quiet woman at the door with a bleeding forehead who just needs someone to listen, even if what she's saying makes no sense at all. It taught me that empathy isn't about fixing people. It's about recognizing their humanity even when their reality doesn't match yours. So if you ever find yourself across from someone whose words don't connect, whose thoughts spiral through invisible storms, don't rush to judge. Don't label them broken. Just remember, the glass that separates their world from yours may be thinner than you think. And the day you see the first crack, you'll hope someone sees you the way you never saw them. Not because they're weak, but because life can be heavier than anyone admits. There's something about looking into the eyes of a person who's completely lost touch with reality that never leaves you. It carves into your memory in a strange, quiet way, not like trauma exactly, but like a shadow that never changes position. I used to think sanity was something we were born with, something that stayed unless something big knocked it loose. But after everything I saw, those strange conversations, the beeping stud finder, the prophecy in the hallway, I began to understand how thin that line really is. It's not a fortress. It's a pane of glass. Sometimes thick. Sometimes hairline thin. And I've seen what happens when it cracks. The woman at the door, picking at her forehead while telling me that pollution caused earthquakes in Vietnam, she was someone's mother. Probably had favorite songs, recipes, moments of laughter. But something inside her turned, and suddenly the world rearranged itself into something terrifying. The hotel guest who believed I was tracking him with a stud finder, he wasn't trying to be strange. He was trying to survive in a world that made no sense to him. He wasn't delusional to himself. To him, I was the threat. And the woman who believed she was Jesus? Maybe she was trying to make sense of pain so massive, so consuming, that the only way forward was to become holy. Maybe believing in divine purpose was safer than facing whatever reality she ran from. People always ask why I didn't try harder to help. But what do you do when help is a word that means nothing to someone anymore? When comfort sounds like conspiracy? When reason feels like betrayal? Sometimes, the best thing you can do is be kind, and then step away before their world pulls you into it. And that's the truth no one wants to talk about. We're all just a few wrong turns away from being misunderstood, feared, or ignored. A few sleepless nights. A heartbreak that hits too deep. A silence that lingers a little too long. We like to think we'd never break. That we'd never slip. But reality is heavy. And not everyone can carry it the same way. I don't tell these stories to scare people. I tell them because they taught me something. That fear wears many faces. Sometimes it's paranoia. Sometimes it's certainty. Sometimes it's a quiet woman at the door with a bleeding forehead who just needs someone to listen, even if what she's saying makes no sense at all. It taught me that empathy isn't about fixing people. It's about recognizing their humanity even when their reality doesn't match yours. So if you ever find yourself across from someone whose words don't connect, whose thoughts spiral through invisible storms, don't rush to judge. Don't label them broken. Just remember, the glass that separates their world from yours may be thinner than you think. And the day you see the first crack, you'll hope someone sees you the way you never saw them. Would you like a voiceover style script, a hook title, or visual scene descriptions to turn this into a storytelling video or short film? Years passed. I moved cities. Changed jobs. Cut my hair shorter, grew it longer again. Tried to outrun the memories, but they followed, soft-footed and persistent, like smoke you can't wave away. Most days, I didn't think about the woman with the open sore, or the man and his cat, or the stranger who called me Judas. But sometimes, on quiet nights when the world felt just a bit too still, they came back. Not like ghosts, more like warnings. I started having dreams I didn't tell anyone about. In one, I was back in the hotel room. Only this time, I was the guest, and someone else was holding the stud finder. It beeped against my chest. I tried to explain myself, but the person at the door just stared like I was speaking in static. In another, I stood on a sidewalk while people walked past me like I wasn't there. I screamed, but no one looked. I banged on windows. Nothing. Then I looked at my own hands, and they were fading. I'd wake up sweating, heart racing. But the fear wasn't just about the dreams, it was the slow, creeping thought that maybe they weren't just dreams. Maybe they were signs. I began watching myself more closely. How I spoke. How I reacted to things. I worried when I misplaced a name, when I lost track of a sentence mid-thought. I started journaling just to make sure my thoughts still made sense. That my version of the world still held shape. One day, while riding the bus, a man near the back started muttering to himself. Loud, fractured sentences. He was pointing at the ceiling, saying something about radio signals and poison in the paint. People shifted away, annoyed or afraid, and I sat there, frozen. Not because of him, but because for a second, I didn't feel fear or pity. I felt recognition. That was when it hit me. What scared me most about those people I'd met all those years ago wasn't just what they believed. It was how easily the world turned away from them. How quickly everyone stopped listening. I started to wonder, what if they hadn't always been like that? What if they'd once been just like me? Someone who knocked on a friend's door, or walked into a hotel lobby with a cat? What if they'd cried for help, only softer than the world could hear? And what if, one day, I did the same? That's when I realized something terrifying and true. Sanity isn't what keeps the world listening to you, credibility is. And once you lose that, you can scream all you want. No one's coming. So I started checking in on people more, quietly. Not the loudest ones, but the quietest. I texted friends I hadn't heard from. Asked how they were really doing. Watched for the subtle pauses in conversations, the awkward laughter that lasted a second too long. And I started talking more openly about fear, especially the kind that doesn't make sense. Because I figured maybe that's how you keep the glass from cracking, by acknowledging the tremor before it becomes a break. Maybe the best we can do isn't to fix each other, but to stand beside someone when the mirror starts to warp, and say, I see you. I believe you. And you're not alone. It happened on a Tuesday. Cloudy skies, soft drizzle on the windows, the kind of weather that makes you feel like the world has turned its volume down. I was sitting in a small cafe, nursing a bitter cup of coffee, watching people pass by outside. I just read a news story about a local man who had vanished, someone who'd reportedly struggled with paranoia, seen spiraling in recent months. Friends said they hadn't noticed until it was too late. The article said, he slipped through the cracks. That phrase, it stuck to my ribs. Slipped through the cracks. As if people are water. As if it's natural. That same afternoon, an older woman walked into the cafe. She wore a red coat far too large for her frame, her hair tangled from the rain. She carried a plastic shopping bag full of paper scraps and muttered softly to herself. Nobody looked up. Nobody even blinked. Except me. And as she walked past, she stopped for half a second. Just enough time for our eyes to meet. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just looked, really looked. Like I'd wanted someone to do for me during the hardest nights. And for a brief second, something flickered behind her expression. A pause. A flicker of recognition. Maybe not of me, but of being seen. Then she moved on, disappeared out the door like a mist the wind forgot to carry. That was when I realized the truth I'd been circling for years. The people I'd encountered, Mark's mother with her bleeding forehead and fractured logic, the man with his cat and the stud finder, the self-declared prophetess who believed I was Judas, they weren't just strange memories. They were warnings. Not just about how fragile the mind is, but about how easily the world gives up on people when their pain stops making sense. We have this illusion that we're protected by normalcy. That sanity is armor. But it's not. It's glass. Beautiful, clear, and thin. And every one of us is just one tremor away from shattering. That's not said to scare you. It's to remind you to listen. Really listen. To the friend who's quieter than usual. To the stranger talking too loud in the park. To the cashier who forgets your change and stares too long. To the family member whose thoughts come out tangled and sharp. Don't brush them off. Don't look away. Because that one moment, where someone feels truly seen, can be the thing that stops them from falling all the way through. In the end, I've learned that compassion is more than just kindness. It's resistance. It's defiance against a world that makes it far too easy to slip between the cracks unnoticed. And if I ever find myself on the other side of the glass, blinking, lost, not quite tethered to the ground, I hope someone looks me in the eye. I hope they hear me. Even if my words don't make sense. Even if I've forgotten how to ask for help. Even if all I can do is whisper. Story 6, The House That Tried to Break Us. I was never supposed to know how dark a person's soul could be, not at that age. When we left Country 1 and moved to Country 2, I believed we were chasing a better life. My parents believed that too. We settled in City 1 and tried to build something real, a home, a routine, a future. For 3 years, things were hard, but we were together. And that made everything feel bearable. Then my uncle called. He was my dad's brother, and to me, he had always been a figure of affection and admiration. I didn't know him well, but I had built a picture of him in my mind, kind, warm, strong. So when he invited us to live with him in City 2, I was excited. I imagined we would become a big, happy family. He had a wife, 2 daughters, and a large 3-story home. My parents trusted him, and I did too. That trust was my first mistake. We moved in during the winter of 2020. My dad was promised work. He and my uncle were supposed to start a business together. Only my mom worked at first, quickly finding a job at a salon. My dad, with all his skills and generosity, agreed to help his brother without question. At first, life in the new house felt warm, spacious, comfortable. Everyone had their own room. We were grateful, and I was still clinging to the belief that we were safe, that family meant something unbreakable. That illusion shattered quickly. The first time I saw my uncle truly lose control, he was yelling at his wife. Loud, vicious, humiliating. Then he turned his anger on my dad, who had only tried to calm him down. My mother froze. My sisters and I were terrified. Something shifted in me that day. I stopped seeing him as my favorite uncle. I started hearing the whispers behind closed doors, my mom and his wife, murmuring about how people never change, and how he had always been this way. I began to notice everything. The manipulative way he spoke to his daughters, the way he belittled my dad after using him. My father, who built a house with his own 2 hands for my uncle's friend, was accused of doing nothing. My mom held us close, whispering that adult problems weren't for children, but I knew enough. I'll never forget the day my uncle screamed at my little sister. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. His voice thundered down the stairs like a weapon, and she shrank into herself like a flame being snuffed out. My blood boiled. I wanted to protect her. I wanted to scream back. But I didn't. I froze. And I've hated myself for that moment every day since. But what really broke me was what he did to his own child. His wife had given birth to a beautiful baby girl. She was innocent, sweet, the only bright light in that dark house. I loved her deeply, as if she were my own sister. But one day, my uncle shouted at her. She was barely a year old. She stood there, small and shaking, as he called her names I can't even repeat. I stood frozen, unable to believe what I was seeing. His wife ran in and snatched the baby away. That night, my parents made a decision. We were leaving. City 2, my new college, my friends, the baby, I had to let go of it all. But I didn't care. That house had become a prison. My parents packed everything in a week. My dad told my uncle we were leaving, and of course, he tried to guilt him. Said he was shaming the family by returning to City 1. That our relatives would judge us. But my father, for once, didn't care. He had given everything, and was walking away with nothing but his dignity. We returned to City 1 and bought a modest house a few months later. We weren't rich, but we were free. For a while, it felt like we were finally breathing again. But the story didn't end. The debts followed us, especially the car loan my dad had taken for my uncle. It was supposed to be temporary. There was even a lawyer, someone my uncle knew, who claimed he could make the debt disappear. But months passed, and nothing changed. Eventually, my dad sold the car and paid it off himself. We may not have a luxury vehicle, but we have something better: peace, a roof over our heads, and each other. Just as life was settling down, more trouble came. Back in City 2, my uncle had bought a small plot of land and put it in my sister's name, calling it a gift. She was underage, legally unable to make decisions about it. But now, he wanted it back. Demanding. Pressuring. Pretending to care. We ignored him. We learned our lesson. Then came the voicemails. They were meant for my dad but sent to my grandmother. She had moved in with us to fix her documents, something my uncle refused to help her with, despite being her son. One day, she mentioned the messages. I got curious. I wasn't supposed to listen, but I did. And I wish I hadn't. The things he said, pure poison. His voice was soaked in hatred, filled with accusations, twisted lies. I couldn't believe it was the same man I once loved. The same man who held my hand when I was a child, who smiled at me like I mattered. It was like hearing a demon speak through someone you once called family. I later found out my dad received similar messages. He never played them for us. He just carried that pain in silence, like he always does. The hardest part of all this isn't just the betrayal. It's watching the two people I love most, my mom and dad, get used, hurt, humiliated by someone they only ever tried to help. My father took care of that man like a brother. He trusted him, believed in him. And in return, he got lies, debt, and rage. My uncle ruined every chance we gave him. His addictions, his shady friends, his schemes, they consumed him. And when they turned on him, he blamed us. But we're not victims anymore. We may not be able to erase the scars. I still think of that baby girl. I still remember my little sister's tears. I still feel anger that burns so hot I have to breathe through it just to stay calm. But we survived. My parents are stronger than ever. My sister is safe. I'm telling this story because I've kept it hidden for so long, pretending everything was perfect while I burned inside. No more pretending. If you're reading this and you've ever felt powerless in your own family, if someone you trusted turned out to be someone dangerous, you're not alone. You may not be able to change the past. You may not be able to fix what they broke. But you can choose who you become after the fire. And I choose to remember everything. So I never let someone like him into our lives again. Leaving that house didn't mean leaving the damage behind. That's something I didn't understand right away. I thought the moment we packed the car and pulled away from City 2, all the shouting, all the insults, all the weight on our shoulders would just disappear. I thought freedom would feel like breathing fresh air again. But trauma doesn't travel on a map. It follows you, in your thoughts, in your silence, in your memories. At first, everything in City 1 felt quieter. Peaceful. We slept better. My little sister didn't jump at loud noises anymore. My mom smiled more often, even laughed, though sometimes her laugh felt like a mask. My dad worked endlessly, doing whatever jobs he could find to help us land on our feet. He never once complained, even while carrying the debt that wasn't even his to begin with. As for me, I thought I could forget. But I couldn't. There were nights when I would hear yelling in my dreams. I'd wake up sweating, heart pounding, still expecting to hear my uncle's voice echoing through the walls. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't want to burden my parents, they were already carrying so much. So I started pretending again. Smiling. Acting like everything was fine. But it wasn't. I felt guilt most of all. Guilt for not standing up to my uncle that day when he screamed at the baby girl. Guilt for not defending my little sister when she was terrified. Guilt for watching my dad silently take blow after blow from someone he considered a brother. I hated how powerless I had been. And sometimes, I hated myself for how much I used to love my uncle. For the memories I'd attached to someone who turned out to be a monster. For years, I had looked up to him. I had imagined him as this proud, strong, dependable man. And when all of that cracked and fell apart, something inside me cracked too. I started to notice things more in my daily life. When someone raised their voice in public, I flinched. When I heard someone say, "Family is everything," I'd feel sick, because I knew it wasn't always true. Blood can hurt worse than strangers ever could. I also began seeing my dad differently. He used to seem invincible, tall, brave, untouchable. But now, I saw him as human. I saw how much he had sacrificed, how deeply he had been hurt, and how hard he worked to protect us even when no one protected him. His silence, once mistaken for calm, now looked like restraint. Like someone holding everything together with bare hands. And my mom? She was the one who glued us back together. I think she's the only reason we didn't fall apart completely. Even when her heart was breaking, she found the strength to comfort me. To hold my sister. To believe in better days, even when those days felt so far away. We tried to rebuild our life slowly. We painted the walls of our new home, bought second-hand furniture, and planted flowers in the front yard. We didn't talk about what happened, not in full, but it lingered in the way we looked at each other. In how quickly we locked the doors. In how tightly we hugged. And then came the land dispute. My uncle, as selfish and manipulative as ever, contacted us again, demanding the return of the land he had supposedly gifted to my sister. She wasn't even old enough to sign a legal paper, let alone handle property. Yet he acted like we owed him something. As if we should just give in. We didn't. This time, we stood our ground. My parents made it clear, Enough was enough. We wouldn't let him control us from a distance, not anymore. But even so, his voice still wormed its way back into our lives, through voicemails, insults, accusations. Always trying to twist the story to make himself the victim. He didn't break us. But he scarred us. And when I see my dad come home from work looking tired but relieved, when I see my sister sleep peacefully without fear, when I hear my mom humming softly in the kitchen, I know we're healing. Slowly. Quietly. On our own terms. We didn't get justice. We didn't get an apology. But we got away. And sometimes, that's enough to start again. I thought distance would protect us. That being back in City 1, away from his house, away from his presence, would make us unreachable. But I was wrong. Even from afar, my uncle found ways to make himself felt. He didn't need to be in the room to poison the air. It started with that plot of land. The one he claimed to gift to my sister. She was still under 18, and legally, she couldn't make decisions about it. But that didn't matter to him. He began calling. Demanding. Insisting we return the land. Acting like we were thieves for holding on to something he gave away. He wasn't just trying to get the land back, he was trying to pull us back under his control. We ignored him. At first. But he didn't stop. He found new ways to inject himself into our lives. Through relatives. Through phone calls. Through our grandmother, who had moved in with us for help with her citizenship papers, something my uncle never cared to do for her. She had left his house too, quietly, without argument. I think deep down, she had seen enough too. One evening, I overheard her talking to my dad in the kitchen. They spoke in hushed tones, like people tiptoeing around a sleeping bomb. I caught one phrase, "He sent me a voice message. I didn't want you to hear it." I couldn't ignore that. Later, when I was alone with her phone, curiosity got the better of me. I found the message. And I wish I hadn't listened. His voice was like a blade, calm on the surface, but every word was laced with venom. He called my dad names I won't repeat. Accused him of things that never happened. Claimed he had done everything for us, and that we had repaid him with betrayal. It wasn't just anger. It was performance. He wanted to sound like the victim. Like the one who was wronged. I listened once, then twice, then again, trying to make sense of it. But the more I heard, the less it made sense. This wasn't a man lashing out because he was hurt. This was someone who refused to accept that we were free from him. That we had walked away. I learned that my dad had also received these messages, directly. But he never told us. He never let us hear them. He just endured them silently, like he always did. Not because he was weak, but because he didn't want us to carry his pain. But I was already carrying my own. I hated what those messages did to me. They made me feel small again. Powerless. Like I was still stuck in that house, frozen in place, watching a man scream at a child. I wanted to scream back now. I wanted to tell him everything he deserved to hear. That we were not the ones who betrayed him. That my dad had built him a life, and he had smashed it with his own hands. That my mom worked 12-hour shifts while he sat in his house playing businessman. That his lies would never erase what we saw. But I didn't send a message. I didn't call. I did what my dad taught me, what I saw him do every day. I endured. We endured. But something changed in me that night. I stopped feeling afraid of him. I started seeing him for what he really was, not a towering figure of authority, not a powerful man, not a scary presence I had to tiptoe around. He was just a loud, broken man desperate to control something, even if it meant breaking his own family. He didn't scare me anymore. He disgusted me. And once you stop being afraid of someone like that, they lose their power. The worst thing about being hurt by family isn't just the pain, it's the confusion. You grow up believing that family means safety, loyalty, unconditional love. So when someone who shares your blood poisons everything around you, it doesn't just break your heart. It shatters something deeper. It rewrites the rules of trust. But even shattered things can be rebuilt. And that's exactly what we started doing. After the last voice messages from my uncle, we all quietly agreed, he was no longer part of our lives. Not in the way that matters. Not in decisions, not in our home, not in our hearts. He was a shadow, loud, persistent, and ugly, but still just a shadow. And shadows disappear when you turn toward the light. My parents focused on what they had control over, us, our new home, our future. They worked hard. My mom picked up extra hours at the salon. My dad finally got some freelance work in construction and house repairs, enough to support us without depending on anyone. It wasn't easy. Every bill was a challenge, every debt a mountain. But this time, we were climbing it on our own terms. We were poor in money, but rich in something else, peace. And that peace meant everything. My sister started smiling again, really smiling, not the forced kind she used to wear in that house. She began drawing little pictures and taping them to the fridge. My dad always pointed them out like they were priceless works of art. And me? I started writing. It was the only thing that helped. I didn't talk much, I didn't want to be the dramatic one, or the angry one. But the anger was there. The sadness, too. It sat heavy in my chest some days, especially when I remembered that baby girl, the only innocent light in that dark chapter. I wondered how she was. If she was safe. If she still cried when someone raised their voice. But writing helped me speak when I couldn't. It helped me remember what we'd survived. It helped me realize that just because someone tries to break you doesn't mean they succeed. We were still standing. Scarred? Yes. But upright. Breathing. Together. My dad sold the car, the one tied to the debt that nearly drowned us. He let it go without bitterness. And when he handed over the keys to the buyer, I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time: freedom. That car wasn't just metal and wheels. It was a symbol of everything we'd lost, and everything we were ready to leave behind. After that, things got better. Not magically. Not all at once. But better. We still lived simply. No luxury vacations, no brand new furniture. But we had warmth. We had food. We had each other. And most importantly, we had the kind of silence in our house that didn't feel dangerous. It felt calm. Restful. Healing. Some nights, we talked about what happened, just a little. My parents never forced it. But they listened. My mom would hold my hand across the table, and I knew she didn't have the words, but her presence was enough. My dad would say things like, "I'm sorry I trusted him," and I wanted to scream, "You didn't fail us. He failed you." I never told them everything I felt. Not yet. But someday, I will. Someday, I'll sit them down and tell them how much I admire their strength. How much I saw, even when they thought I wasn't looking. How grateful I am that they didn't let the hate in that house turn them into hateful people. Because that's the real miracle. We didn't become like him. We walked through fire, but we didn't burn down with it. We held on to love, even when someone tried to twist it into something ugly. We let go of him, but we didn't let go of ourselves. And that's how we won. It's strange, how something that nearly breaks you can also shape you. How pain can leave behind something solid. Quiet strength. Fierce clarity. A version of yourself that never existed before. That's what I'm learning now. I used to think survival meant forgetting, erasing the memories, pretending the screams never happened, acting like I hadn't watched someone I once loved become a stranger. But I realize now that surviving doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering, and still choosing to move forward. Our lives are quieter now. We're still rebuilding, still watching our budget closely, still learning how to be soft with each other after spending too long walking on eggshells. But there's joy here. Real joy. In the tiny things. The sound of my sister laughing at a dumb cartoon. My dad singing softly while fixing something around the house. My mom making tea and humming old songs from home. And me, I'm not the same girl I was in that house. I don't feel small anymore. I still have bad days. I still wake up sometimes remembering the yelling, or the look on my baby cousin's face when he screamed at her. That moment is burned into me. But instead of being haunted by it, I've started letting it remind me why I'll never let someone like him into my life again. I've set boundaries in my heart. And even if I can't physically confront him, even if I can't undo what happened, I can protect myself from ever being pulled back into that cycle. I've learned what real family looks like. What love looks like. And it doesn't look like power, or control, or manipulation. It looks like the way my parents stood by each other when they had nothing. The way they kept showing up, for us, and for each other. That's the kind of love I believe in now. I used to feel powerless. Now, I feel growing. Not fully healed. Not perfect. But not broken either. There's something sacred in being able to say, I survived. Something powerful in writing it down, in choosing to speak, even if I have to use a translator. Because truth is truth, no matter the language. And if you're reading this, if you've ever felt powerless, silenced, or ashamed for something someone else did to you, please know, your silence doesn't protect anyone. Your pain isn't weakness. Your story matters. And it's okay to burn with rage, but don't let it burn you. Let it shape you. Let it teach you where your boundaries are. Let it show you what you'll never accept again. My uncle hasn't disappeared. He's still the same man, shouting into voicemails, playing victim to anyone who'll listen. But the difference is, he doesn't have access to my life anymore. Not to my peace. Not to my home. Not to who I'm becoming. I still remember everything. But I no longer live in it. I'm building a new story now, one that doesn't begin and end with him. A story with my family, with laughter, with slow, stubborn healing. A story that belongs to me. And I'm finally proud of the girl writing it. Story 7, I never felt hunger, until one pill changed everything. For most of my life, I believed I had won the genetic lottery. I'm a guy in my mid-20s, and ever since high school, my weight has hovered around the same number, 150 pounds. No diets, no gym routines, no health obsessions. Just staying that way, effortlessly. People joked about how lucky I was. I nodded, laughed along, and secretly felt the same. The truth is, I didn't eat much. I wasn't starving myself, I just didn't have the urge. My appetite was weirdly quiet. Meals were more of a task than a craving. I'd skip lunch and not even notice. Sometimes, I forgot if I'd eaten dinner the night before. I assumed I just had an efficient body or a fast metabolism, maybe an overactive digestive system. Whatever it was, it worked. I never gave it much thought. That changed about a year ago. It started with something small, but disturbing. I began waking up with a truly awful taste in my mouth. Not just bad breath, rotten breath. The kind that makes you check if something literally died inside your mouth overnight. Brushing, mouthwash, flossing, it didn't help. The taste would return the next morning, no matter how well I cleaned my teeth before bed. So I went to a clinic, thankfully, free healthcare is a thing where I live, and explained the problem. The doctor asked me some unexpected questions. Do you get heartburn? Trouble sleeping? Feel sick when you haven't eaten for a while? I shrugged. Not really. I just wanted my mouth to stop smelling like a trash fire. He listened carefully, then said it could be acid reflux or GERD. Basically, he suspected that while I was sleeping, my stomach was producing too much acid, and that acid was creeping back up into my throat. Even if I wasn't feeling the burn, it could still be doing damage, and explaining the awful taste in the mornings. He prescribed me a medication that would reduce my stomach acid production. Simple enough. I took the first pill that night before bed, not expecting much. But what happened next genuinely shocked me. The next morning, about 45 minutes after I took the second dose, I felt something I wasn't prepared for. I was starving. Not in a I could eat kind of way. It was a deep, urgent, all-consuming hunger that made me stop mid-thought. It hit like a wave and wrapped around my entire body. My stomach wasn't just empty, it was demanding. For the first time in my adult life, I understood what people meant when they said, "I'm so hungry I can't think." I always thought people exaggerated when they complained about hunger. Like when coworkers would say, "Ugh, I'm starving," just 2 hours after lunch. I'd silently think, "Really? You ate more than me and you're hungry already?" I thought they were being dramatic. I assumed they just had weak willpower or were overly attached to food. But now I understood. This wasn't a craving. This was a need. It was like a sharp rock in my shoe, but instead of my foot, the pain was in my gut. Constant, grinding, and impossible to ignore. It took over my entire awareness. I couldn't focus on anything else. Work, conversations, even simple thoughts, all drowned out by this primal message: eat. Now. For the first time in my life, food wasn't optional. It wasn't something I could delay until later or distract myself from. It was the only thing that mattered in that moment. I ate. A lot more than usual. And something strange happened. I felt full, not just filled up. There was a sense of satisfaction, not just that my stomach wasn't empty. I had never known the difference. Before, I would eat just enough to stop the noise. Now, I could feel what it meant to be nourished. It was both uncomfortable and eye-opening. This new hunger continued throughout the 30 days I took the medication. It didn't matter what I ate or how much, I kept feeling that intense need, especially in the mornings. And the more it happened, the more I began to reflect on what I had missed all these years. Had my quiet appetite been a sign that something was wrong all along? Was my body simply adapting to acid levels, suppressing signals, quietly suffering while I thought everything was fine? It made me reevaluate everything I believed about myself. My size. My health. My habits. I wasn't just lucky. I was unaware. I had misunderstood my own body for years. And more importantly, I had misunderstood other people. All those times I'd judged someone for complaining about hunger. I was wrong. I hadn't been stronger. I hadn't been better at resisting food. I just hadn't felt what they were feeling. Now I had. And it was intense. It humbled me. Made me more compassionate. Made me realize how unique each person's relationship with hunger and food really is. Some people need that snack at 10 a.m. Some people can't focus unless they've eaten. It's not a weakness. It's biology. And sometimes, biology is louder than willpower. When the medication ran out, the intense hunger dulled a bit. The acid came back slowly. That awful morning taste returned. But now, I'm paying attention. I'm noticing how much food my body needs. I'm listening to signals I used to ignore. I'm thinking about seeing a specialist. Not because I want to go back to that quiet version of hunger, but because I want to understand what's really happening inside me. This whole experience showed me something simple but powerful. Hunger isn't just a feeling. It's a message. And sometimes, we don't hear it until something forces us to finally listen. The first week on the medication was the hardest. Every morning, I woke up feeling like something was wrong, like something urgent needed fixing. It was this physical emptiness in my stomach that gnawed at me, sharp and constant, a dull ache that refused to be ignored. The feeling didn't just sit in my stomach, it spread. Into my thoughts. Into my emotions. It made me restless, irritable, and a little scared. I wasn't used to this kind of intensity. I'd always believed I had a high tolerance for discomfort. I thought of myself as someone who could skip meals without consequence, who didn't need breakfast or snacks like everyone else seemed to. But this was different. It was like my body had been muted for years, and now it was screaming. I began noticing how often hunger controlled my decisions. I would plan my day around when I could eat, something I had never done before. Food stopped being a background detail and became the center of everything. I craved specific things, warm food, comfort food, carbs. Even the texture mattered. I wanted thick soups, chewy bread, meat with real weight to it. And the strangest part? I wasn't binging. I wasn't stuffing myself. I was eating more, yes, but it was like my body finally wanted food. Not just tolerated it. There was a clear difference between eating because I was supposed to, and eating because my body demanded it. That demand changed how I looked at food itself. Before, food was fuel. Or sometimes just a habit. A sandwich for lunch because it was noon. Rice and chicken for dinner because that's what was available. I didn't think about taste, satisfaction, or what my body might be telling me. Now I did. Now, food had weight. Emotion. Presence. There was this moment, a quiet one, that really stuck with me. I was in the kitchen late one evening, heating up leftovers. It was nothing special. Just a bowl of reheated noodles. But I remember sitting at the table, spoon in hand, and taking the first bite. And I almost cried. Not because it tasted amazing, but because it hit something deep in me. Something I hadn't known I was missing. I felt full, warm, and safe. That bowl of food gave me something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. I realized I had been living in survival mode, quietly starving without knowing it, and now, for the first time, I wasn't. That night I sat in silence after finishing the meal, just listening to my body. And for once, it didn't feel like it was fighting me. There was no growling stomach, no sharp emptiness clawing at my ribs. Just stillness. Peace. I know that sounds dramatic, but if you've never felt that contrast, it's hard to explain. When your normal is silence and suppression, any voice, even the voice of hunger, feels like waking up. The medication was doing its job. But it was also revealing something more important, that my body had been compensating for something broken for a long time. The acid, the suppressed appetite, the effortless weight control, it was never about luck. It was about imbalance. About something inside me struggling and me not noticing. And I couldn't stop thinking. How many other things have I been ignoring? How many signals has my body been trying to send me over the years? How many symptoms have I brushed off because they didn't feel serious enough? More than I'd like to admit. This whole experience wasn't just about stomach acid. It was about learning to listen to the body I've been living in for over 2 decades. Learning that just because something has always been a certain way doesn't mean it's normal. Or healthy. That week, I started tracking what I ate, not to diet, but to pay attention. I started writing down how I felt before and after meals. I even set timers to make sure I wasn't going too long without food. Not because I was afraid of being hungry, but because I finally understood what it meant to nourish myself. There's a kind of power in that. It's not about controlling your body. It's about finally hearing it. As the days went on, something unexpected happened. I started seeing people differently. Before all this, I wouldn't say I was judgmental, but I definitely had assumptions. I'd hear someone complain about being hangry and think they were being dramatic. I'd see someone eating a big meal and wonder if they ever got full. I'd watch my friends reach for snacks in the middle of the afternoon and quietly think, that's unnecessary. But after feeling that kind of hunger myself, deep, unrelenting, painful hunger, I started realizing how unfair I had been. I hadn't understood what they were feeling because I'd never felt it. I had built this quiet superiority in my head, believing I had more control, more discipline. But it wasn't discipline. It was just that my body had been whispering when theirs had been screaming. And now that my body had finally learned to scream, I understood exactly why they acted the way they did. Food wasn't weakness. Hunger wasn't drama. It was real. Powerful. Inescapable. I thought back to my teenage years, the way I used to breeze through meals or forget to eat entirely while others obsessively tracked their snacks. I remembered a friend who once cried because she'd tried a new diet and failed after 3 days. I hadn't understood then. But I do now. That pain, that desperation, it wasn't about willpower. It was about biology, hormones, the way her body was wired. And suddenly, I felt guilty. Not for anything I'd said out loud, but for the thoughts I'd held in silence. The assumptions I had about people and their food habits. Their weight. Their excuses. Those thoughts had always come from a place of ignorance. Now, they were replaced with something better. Compassion. I started noticing little things. Like how my coworker always had snacks in her bag, not because she was overeating, but because if she didn't eat every few hours, she'd get dizzy. Or how my roommate sometimes skipped dinner, not by choice, but because food insecurity was a real part of his past. The way he hovered over leftovers, or how he always offered to cook but never asked for help buying ingredients. I had never connected the dots. And even more than that, I started noticing how people talked about food and their bodies. How much shame there was. How even casual conversations at work were soaked in guilt. I was bad this weekend, I had cake. I need to skip lunch, I feel bloated. I can't believe I ate all that, I'm such a pig. Before, I probably would have nodded along. But now? I flinched hearing those words. Why are we so harsh on ourselves about something as essential as eating? Why do we label food as bad or sinful? Why do we feel like eating when we're hungry is something to apologize for? It hit me hard how deeply our culture has warped our relationship with food. I had lived outside of that pressure for so long, not because I was enlightened, but because my body never pulled me into the conversation. Now, I was inside it. And I hated what I saw. The worst part? I realized how lonely food can be for some people. We eat together. We celebrate with food. But we also isolate each other with food. We comment on people's weight, their portions, their choices. We compare. We judge. Even when we don't mean to. And yet, eating, at its core, is one of the most basic, unifying human experiences. This whole journey, starting from that awful taste in my mouth, to the doctor visit, to the acid-reducing meds, had become something much bigger than I expected. It wasn't just about fixing my stomach. It was about fixing my understanding. I wasn't just seeing food differently. I was seeing people differently. And most surprisingly of all, I was seeing myself differently. By the time the 30-day medication ended, the intense hunger began to fade. Slowly, gradually, like a tide receding from the shore. The gnawing urgency wasn't there anymore, at least not with the same sharpness. But I was different. And I knew it. The taste in my mouth returned, faint but familiar. It reminded me of where it all started, a small symptom I almost dismissed. But now, I knew better than to ignore what my body was telling me. I didn't go back to the way I used to live. Not entirely. Something had shifted. And once you've heard your body speak that loudly, you don't forget the sound. I began to notice the early signs of hunger, not just the loud ones. A little tightness in the stomach. A strange fog in my brain. A flicker of impatience during conversations. These were signals I used to override. Now, I listened. I also changed how I approached food. I stopped thinking in terms of enough to survive and started asking, what does my body need to feel good? Not just full, but satisfied, comfortable, safe. I no longer ate like someone passing time. I ate like someone coming home. I even began planning meals, a strange concept for someone who used to skip them. I bought groceries with intention. Not just frozen meals or random items that looked convenient, but actual ingredients. Vegetables I knew how to cook. Protein that gave me lasting energy. Meals that didn't just fill me but fueled me. It wasn't about eating perfectly, it was about respecting my own hunger. And I also stopped judging others. That might have been the biggest change. I stopped commenting on what people ate, even in my head. I stopped assuming that a person's body told their story. I stopped labeling hunger as weakness. Because I had learned, firsthand, that hunger can teach us more about ourselves than any diet plan, any mirror, or any number on a scale ever could. This wasn't just about food. This was about presence. For years, I had been disconnected from myself, floating, functioning, and never once asking why I was the way I was. I didn't realize how much of my identity was built around absence, an absent appetite, an absent urgency, an absent curiosity. Now, I was learning to be present. Not just with hunger, but with life. When I felt tired, I rested. When I felt emotional, I didn't brush it off. When someone told me they were struggling, I didn't default to "you'll be fine." I listened. The way I had learned to listen to my body. Funny how one pill changed everything. But it wasn't really the medication that transformed me. It was what it revealed. It took the lid off a part of me I didn't even know was sealed shut. It reminded me that my body had always been trying to talk to me, I had just never listened closely enough. That lesson will stay with me forever. I still don't know if my appetite will ever be normal by the world's standards. Maybe I'll always eat a little less. Maybe I'll need to be more conscious of when and how I nourish myself. That's okay. Because now I understand. Health isn't about control. It's about connection. It's about knowing that your body isn't your enemy, or a mystery to be feared. It's a partner. It speaks. And if you're brave enough to listen, you might be surprised by what it's been trying to tell you all along. And maybe, just maybe, you'll finally hear it. 6 months after I stopped the medication, I had settled into a new rhythm. The intense hunger from those early weeks had faded, but something else had taken its place: awareness. A gentle, consistent understanding of my body's needs. I wouldn't call myself a health guru now, or even someone obsessed with food. But I had become someone who noticed. Someone who paid attention. I began waking up earlier. Not because I had to, but because I wanted breakfast. I had never wanted breakfast before. Now, I'd get up, make eggs or toast or oatmeal, and eat at the table instead of over the sink like I used to. It felt like reclaiming something I hadn't realized I was missing: ritual. And this shift bled into other parts of my life. I started grocery shopping with lists. I planned my meals. I even invited friends over to cook with me, something I'd never done before. Food had gone from being a quiet, functional part of my day to something alive, shared, and intentional. But the biggest change? My relationships. I started noticing when others were hungry, too. My roommate used to come home late from work, slump into a chair, and grumble about his day while eating cereal for dinner. Before, I might have barely registered it. Now, I could see the fatigue, the way hunger was tangled up with stress, with loneliness. I began asking if he wanted real food. Sometimes we'd cook together. Sometimes I'd just keep him company while he ate. That mattered more than I expected. My parents noticed a difference in me, too. When I visited, I didn't just show up, I brought ingredients, cooked meals, asked them questions about what they ate growing up. For the first time, we talked about food not just as survival, but as culture, as memory, as comfort. I realized how many meals I had ignored or rushed through, never noticing how much effort my mom put into them. I also began treating myself differently, with more softness. When I felt low, I didn't immediately distract myself. I sat with the feeling. I asked what I needed: food, rest, water, company. Hunger had taught me to listen, and I was listening more carefully to everything now. My body, my heart, my mind. Even my doctor noticed. At my follow-up appointment, he asked how I felt. I told him I didn't just feel better. I felt awake. Like I had been walking around numb for years and finally found a part of myself I didn't know was missing. He smiled and said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the body whispers until it has to scream. Sounds like you finally heard it before it got too loud. He was right. Now, I journal regularly, not just about food, but about how I feel in my body. Some days are good, some not so much. But I always check in. I never ignore myself the way I used to. I'm not perfect. I still forget to eat sometimes. But I no longer see that as strength. I see it as a warning. My story isn't about a miracle diet, or a dramatic weight change, or a huge health scare. It's about a tiny, ordinary symptom, bad breath in the morning, that pulled back the curtain on everything I didn't know about myself. And if you ask me now what I learned, I'd say this: we think we know ourselves. But often, we've just gotten used to the silence. The absence of pain. The background noise. Real awareness isn't loud. It's quiet. Like a stomach rumbling. Like a craving you finally listen to. Like the feeling of peace after a real meal. And once you hear it, you don't want to go back to silence again. A full year since that strange, bitter taste in my mouth pulled me into a journey I never expected. A year since I first stood in that clinic, half annoyed, half curious, thinking it was just a minor inconvenience. A year since I first felt what true hunger actually meant. So much has changed since then, and yet, on the surface, I look exactly the same. Same weight. Same clothes. Same face in the mirror. But I'm not the same man. Back then, I thought I was healthy because nothing was wrong. I had no diagnoses, no weight fluctuations, no pain. But now I understand that not feeling bad isn't the same as feeling good. That coasting isn't the same as living. That existing inside your body passively is miles away from being present in it. I think about food differently now, not as a task or fuel or something I can afford to ignore, but as a relationship. Something sacred. Something connected to time, memory, love. I no longer skip meals like they don't matter. I no longer pride myself on being low maintenance when it comes to eating. Because now I know, there's no badge of honor in denying your own needs. I also think about other people differently. When someone says they're starving, I don't roll my eyes. When someone struggles with food guilt or shame, I don't try to fix it, I just listen. I've learned that empathy isn't saying, I understand. It's being able to say, I didn't understand before, but I do now. And most importantly, I've learned to be gentler with myself. I used to see my body as a machine that didn't ask for much. But now, I see it more like a quiet roommate, always trying to tell me something, even if I wasn't listening. It tells me when I'm tired. It tells me when I'm anxious. It tells me when I'm hungry, not just for food, but for rest, connection, stillness. I've become more aware of those hungers, too. The hunger for safety. The hunger for kindness. The hunger to feel like I matter, not because I can suppress my needs, but because I finally learned how to honor them. That, to me, is health. Not six-pack abs. Not calorie charts. Not a flawless routine. But this, knowing how to feed yourself in every sense of the word. Physically. Emotionally. Spiritually. So where do I go from here? I don't know exactly. I'm still figuring it out. I'm not perfect, I still forget to bring lunch sometimes, still eat mindlessly when I'm distracted, still have days where I ignore myself. But now, when that happens, I recognize it. I don't shame myself. I just return. I come back. I listen again. That's the quiet revolution that happened inside me. It didn't come with fanfare. It came with silence. It came with a bite of warm food after hours of aching hunger. With learning to recognize what a craving actually feels like. With the realization that I had spent years surviving, but not quite living. And maybe most people won't notice the change. Maybe no one else can see it. But I can feel it, in every meal I prepare with care. In every decision to rest instead of push through. In every moment I choose to listen instead of ignore. This is what healing looks like. This is what presence feels like. And for the first time in a long time, I am home. Story 8, The Uncle Who Shattered Everything. When we moved from Country 1 to Country 2, everything felt like a new beginning. We settled in City 1 for 3 years. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, familiar, simple, and filled with dreams. Then, in the winter of 2020, everything changed. My dad's older brother, my beloved uncle, invited us to live with him in City 2. He had a family, a wife, 2 daughters, and a big house. I'd never met them, but I trusted him. I adored him. To me, he was kind, warm, and generous. I thought he saw me like a daughter. He was my favorite uncle. So when he offered to let us stay with him while Dad worked with him to start a business, it felt like a blessing. My dad didn't hesitate. We packed up and moved. The house was massive, 3 stories tall, with room for all of us, even my grandmother, who lived with us. Everyone had space, their own rooms, privacy. On the surface, it was perfect. But reality didn't take long to show its true face. At first, the days were good. Warm dinners. Conversations. Laughter. But it didn't last. One night, out of nowhere, my uncle exploded, yelling at his wife, shouting at my dad who tried to calm him. It was terrifying. My cousins and I cowered in silence. My mom stood frozen, shocked. I started listening more carefully to the whispers behind closed doors. My mom and my aunt talking in the kitchen. "He'll never change," my mom said. "He's always been like this." I realized I had never truly known the man I once admired. We couldn't leave. My dad didn't have a job yet. My mom was the only one working, as a hairdresser. They endured humiliation after humiliation, trusting my uncle's empty promises because they believed in family. But the cracks deepened. I'll never forget the moment my uncle screamed at my dad, called him a parasite. This man, who my father had helped, worked for, built a house for, accused him of doing nothing. I wanted to scream back. I wanted to tell him how disgusting he had become. But my mother stopped me, whispering, "This is not your burden to carry." Then came the worst night. My uncle hit his pregnant wife. I remember calling my dad in tears, panicked, terrified. He was out of town, and I was terrified he wouldn't return in time. The rage in that house didn't care who got hurt. When my aunt gave birth to a baby girl, I fell in love instantly. That baby was the light in the darkest place I'd ever lived in. But not even she was safe. One afternoon, my uncle lost it again, this time at her. A toddler barely able to walk. He screamed at her so viciously she burst into tears. I stood there, frozen. I couldn't move. I hated myself for that. My aunt rushed in and took her away, shouting at him, protecting her child from her own father. That was it. That night, my parents decided, we were leaving. City 2, with all its promises, its friends, its opportunities, meant nothing anymore. The poison in that house was killing us slowly. And my dad, for the first time, stopped caring about what people would say. He was done. Even when my uncle tried to guilt him, saying we'd embarrass the family by returning to City 1, we didn't look back. We left. Not in anger. Not in chaos. Just quiet, determined freedom. Back in City 1, we started over. It wasn't easy. My dad was in debt, because of my uncle, of course. That car loan? My dad took it out on my uncle's behalf. And when we left, we were stuck with it. The lawyer my uncle had introduced promised to help, said we could win the case in court. But nothing happened. Months passed. We waited. Nothing changed. Finally, my dad sold the car, just to make the debt go away. We gave up a piece of dignity to get back our peace. But it was worth it. We had a home again. We had each other. And that mattered more than a car, more than pride, more than family reputation. We thought we were done with him. But monsters don't just vanish. That same uncle had once put a piece of land under my younger sister's name, a gift, he said. She wasn't even 18. Now he wants it back, and he's not even trying to pretend it's about anything other than greed. It's in her name, legally untouchable. But he pushes anyway. Calls. Messages. Pressure. Then there's my grandmother. She needed help getting her documents, her citizenship. My uncle never lifted a finger. So she came to us, and we helped her. Because that's what real family does. And just when we thought it was finally over, he sent a voice message. I overheard my grandmother talking about it, and eventually, I listened. I wish I hadn't. The things he said about my dad, his own brother, were beyond vile. Full of hate. Full of venom. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He sent others, too, directly to my dad. Messages we never speak about. Maybe it's better that way. I'm still angry. Burning, even. Not just for myself, but for my parents, two people who gave him everything they could. Their time. Their trust. Their faith. And he spit on it all for money, pride, and power. He chose drugs, shady friends, and rage over the people who genuinely loved him. And now, even though we've moved on, the scars remain. Sometimes I still think about that house. About the baby I couldn't protect. About my dad's tired eyes and my mom's quiet suffering. About my uncle's voice echoing through the halls, always angry, always accusing. I've never told this full story before. To everyone else, I'm the girl with the perfect life. But behind that smile, there's a quiet storm I've carried alone. I'm too young to fix anything. Too powerless to get justice. But I promise this. I will never forget. And one day, when I'm strong enough, I will make sure this story isn't buried under silence. Because sometimes, surviving is just the beginning. We thought moving away would end it, that leaving that house, that city, that atmosphere would be the final chapter in our nightmare. For a while, things seemed to get better. We bought a small home in City 1, humble but warm. My mom decorated it with soft curtains and hopeful colors. My dad worked small jobs here and there to keep us afloat. We had peace for the first time in what felt like years. But my uncle? He wasn't done with us. A few months after we moved, the first problem appeared. It was the debt, the car loan my father had taken out in good faith to help his brother. My uncle had promised everything would be handled by his trusted lawyer. But the court case never moved forward. The lawyer stopped answering calls. We realized we'd been strung along. Trapped. We were stuck paying a loan for a car we didn't even use anymore. My father, quietly and with so much dignity, sold the car just to close the debt. It was a bitter moment, watching him hand over the keys to a stranger and receive barely enough to break even. But it was necessary. He chose peace over pride. He let go of the last financial tie to my uncle. I could tell it hurt him. My father had done nothing but give, his labor, his time, his trust, and in return, he was left with shame and debt. But that wasn't the end. Back when we still lived in City 2, my uncle had bought a piece of land and registered it in my sister's name. He said it was a gift for her future. We were surprised but grateful. It felt like a rare act of generosity. But now, years later, he wanted it back. The problem? My sister was still underage. She couldn't legally transfer the land even if she wanted to. But that didn't stop him. He started calling again, sending texts, leaving voicemails. At first, it was polite. Then, when we didn't respond, it turned threatening. He didn't care that it was under her name. He didn't care about legality or family loyalty. He only cared about getting back something he had willingly gifted, because, in his mind, we owed him everything. As if that wasn't enough, he sent our grandmother to us, saying she needed help filing citizenship paperwork. She was sick, fragile, and confused. She said my uncle refused to help her. So my parents took her in. Because that's who they are. They take care of people, even the ones who've hurt them. She stayed with us for weeks. And during that time, I started to notice her phone buzzing with strange voicemails. She mentioned one was from my uncle, directed at my dad. I didn't ask to hear it. I didn't want to. But one night, curiosity and dread got the better of me. I pressed play. It wasn't a message, it was an attack. My uncle's voice poured through the speaker like venom. Angry. Cruel. Spitting out words that didn't even sound human. Accusing my dad of betrayal, of being weak, of abandoning him. He cursed, mocked, and threatened. I sat there, frozen. I had never heard that kind of hatred in someone's voice before. And it was directed at the man who had done nothing but try to help. I learned later that he had sent even more voicemails directly to my father. My dad never played them out loud. Maybe to protect us. Maybe because he couldn't bear to hear them again. I still don't know what they said. But I know they must have been bad, because ever since then, my father has grown quieter. Sadder. Not broken, but heavier. And me? I went from feeling scared of my uncle to being furious. Not just for me, but for my parents. They had sacrificed so much, for him. And all he gave back was poison. He chose drugs, dirty business, shady friends, and empty promises. He could have had a family who loved him. Instead, he chose chaos. And even after everything, after we escaped, after we rebuilt, he still found ways to haunt us. That's when I realized, some people don't stop hurting you just because you walk away. Sometimes, they follow you through the cracks in your peace. They show up in voicemails and debts and legal threats. And sometimes, all you can do is stand your ground, and remember who you are, so you don't become like them. After hearing the voicemail, something inside me shifted. I used to look back on my childhood memories with warmth, family dinners, celebrations, laughter. But now, everything felt tinted with something darker. Bitterness. Regret. Rage. I began to see clearly how fragile the idea of family really was. Especially when someone like my uncle was part of it. I thought about how my dad must have felt listening to those voice messages, coming from his own brother. The same brother he grew up with, trusted, and once loved. I couldn't begin to imagine the pain of betrayal like that. And worse, I saw the toll it took on him every day. He didn't talk about it much. My dad is a quiet man, not one to vent or explode. But he carried it in his posture, in the way he stopped joking as much, in how tired his eyes looked after each day. Every time the phone rang and the name brother popped up, his face would go blank, then quietly decline the call. I wanted to scream at him to block the number, to fight back, to yell. But he didn't. He just kept living. Kept moving. Because that's the kind of man he is. The worst part? We were still trying to be respectful. We still hadn't told the rest of the extended family what was going on. Why? Because we didn't want to cause more conflict. Because my dad still thought of him as family. Because my grandmother still said, "He's your brother, you can't just hate him." But I did. I hated him. I hated how he poisoned everything and somehow still got sympathy. I hated that everyone thought we were just being dramatic. That they didn't see the manipulation, the threats, the harm. And then came the land issue. My uncle continued pressuring us about the land he'd signed over to my younger sister. A piece of land he claimed was a gift, but now demanded back like it was stolen. It wasn't even legal, she wasn't 18, and she had no power to transfer ownership. But that didn't matter to him. He didn't care about laws. He didn't care about what was right. He cared about control. The more we resisted, the more aggressive he became. He started gossiping to our other relatives. Twisting the story. Saying we were ungrateful, saying we betrayed him after everything he'd done for us. He painted himself as the victim, the martyr, the generous brother who had been repaid with cruelty. I couldn't believe it. People actually believed him. Some of our cousins stopped talking to us. Some uncles and aunts grew cold. My dad would come home and just sit silently, hurt but not surprised. This was how things worked in our culture, appearances mattered more than truth. Gossip was stronger than facts. We weren't just being pushed out of our uncle's life. We were slowly being erased from our entire family tree. And even then, my dad never tried to defend himself. He never fought back with insults or anger. He just kept trying to live an honest life. He paid his debts, worked long hours, supported us, and quietly protected us from the emotional wreckage. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. I wanted people to know what he'd done. The manipulation. The screaming. The abuse. The way he yelled at a 1-year-old baby. The way he beat his pregnant wife. The way he nearly destroyed my family with lies and debts. Still, every time I tried to speak, my mom would stop me. "Let it go," she'd say. "He'll destroy himself eventually. Don't let him take you down with him." And deep down, I knew she was right. So I kept my anger to myself, boiling quietly. Watching my family rebuild itself brick by brick, all while the one man who should have supported us tried again and again to tear it down. That's when I understood, family isn't just blood. Sometimes blood betrays you. Sometimes blood is what you have to escape from. Real family are the people who protect you. Who don't yell at children. Who don't call you worthless behind closed doors. Who don't drag you into debts and threats. Who don't send voice messages laced with hatred. Real family are the ones who help you heal. And slowly, day by day, my parents were doing that. Healing. So was I, but the scars, those would stay with us for a long, long time. You would think after all that, after the debts, the abuse, the yelling, the betrayal, he would have just disappeared from our lives. But people like my uncle don't go away quietly. Even when we tried to walk away with grace, he found ways to follow us with his poison. We had moved. We had rebuilt. We had tried to start over. But he still found cracks to seep through phone calls, through legal papers, through relatives he twisted against us. But something had changed in us, too. We were no longer the same family who had walked into his house years ago with open hearts and hopeful eyes. We had learned. We had suffered. We had seen what manipulation looked like behind a smile. And we were stronger now, not because of him, but in spite of him. My dad no longer flinched when his name came up. He spoke less about him, not out of fear, but because some things lose meaning when they no longer hold power over you. He had carried guilt for so long, wondering if maybe he had failed as a brother, if he had missed the signs. But over time, he stopped asking himself those questions. Because the truth is, my dad had only ever tried to help. He gave his brother trust, time, and forgiveness, more than he ever deserved. And what did my uncle do with it? He turned it into a weapon. My mom, God, my mom. She endured everything. She stood between her children and chaos. She kept the peace when there was none. She worked every day while living in that house full of dread, came home to screaming, and still managed to smile for us. I saw her break down only once, late at night, behind the closed bathroom door. I heard her crying softly, thinking we couldn't hear her. But I did. And I think about that moment whenever I start to feel hate rise in me again. Because that's what he left behind, scars not just on our hearts, but in how we live. The way we flinch when someone raises their voice. The way we overthink every kind gesture, wondering if it's a trap. The way we hold each other a little tighter, just in case. Even now, he tries to reach out sometimes. He sends messages through other relatives, coded in manipulation and false concern. But we don't respond. We've learned that peace doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing not to reopen wounds that we're barely able to heal. As for me, I'm still angry. I'm still trying to process everything that happened. I look back on that little girl, my baby cousin, standing frozen while her father screamed in her face, and I hate myself for not doing more. I hate that we had to leave her behind. I don't know what her life is like now. I don't know if she's okay. And that haunts me. But I also know that none of it was my fault. I was just a kid too. And so were my siblings. We were just trying to survive in a house that didn't feel safe. We were doing our best. And now that I'm older, I've realized something. Survival is its own kind of strength. Walking away was our quiet rebellion. Living a better life is our loudest revenge. We still have each other. We have dinners full of laughter again. We play music on weekends. We celebrate birthdays with homemade cakes. We fight sometimes, like any family, but there's love here now. Real love. And him? He's still stuck in that crumbling shell of a world he built for himself. Surrounded by lies, broken trust, and people who only care about what they can take. He may never realize what he lost. Or maybe he does, and that's why he keeps trying to get it back. But we won't let him. This time, we're not afraid to say no. We're not afraid to protect our peace. The scars will always be there. But they remind us of what we've survived. And we will never, ever let him back in. Not again. It's been months since the last time we heard his voice. Months since the voicemails. Months since the last distant relative called us up, trying to guilt us into forgiving him, as if we were the ones who destroyed a family. As if we were the ones who needed to apologize. But we haven't forgotten. I haven't forgotten. There are days when everything feels calm. Our new home is filled with light. My little sister is finally smiling again, my mother hums when she cooks, and my father works in the garden like nothing ever happened. We laugh again. We feel safe. But it's in those moments, when things feel too good to be true, that the memories come back. The yelling. The fear in my sister's eyes. The silence that filled the house after every fight, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I used to bottle everything up. I didn't want people to think my life wasn't perfect. I didn't want my friends to know what had happened, especially not in a country that wasn't even our home. I felt trapped by language, culture, and fear. But not anymore. This story, right now, is the first time I've ever said all of it out loud, even if I'm using a translator to do it. Even if I'm hiding my name. Because somewhere inside me, I know I need this. I need to remember what happened. I need to stop carrying it alone. I need to stop pretending that silence equals peace. Because silence is what allowed him to scream at a baby and still call himself a good man. Silence is what kept my parents from asking for help when they were drowning in debt and shame. Silence is what made me feel like it was wrong to speak. But I'm done with silence. One day, when I'm old enough, when I have the means, the freedom, the voice, I will speak louder. I'll tell the full truth, with my name, with no fear of who hears it. And if that truth makes people uncomfortable, so be it. Let them feel a fraction of what we lived through. Until then, I'll keep remembering. I'll keep writing. Because I never want to forget the lessons I learned. That blood doesn't make someone family. That trust, once shattered, leaves scars deeper than words. That being a good person on the outside means nothing if your heart is filled with cruelty. That love, real love, doesn't come with manipulation, debt, and rage. I remember the day we left that house. We packed quietly, no yelling, no accusations. Just a quiet knowing that this chapter of our lives was over. My uncle wasn't home when we left. And maybe that was for the best. Because if he had been, I might have said something I couldn't take back. And maybe, I still would have regretted not saying it. We drove back to City 1 in silence. But it was a peaceful kind of silence. A silence that said we're free. I looked out the window the whole way, watching buildings blur into countryside. I imagined that little baby girl safe in a better world. I imagined our family laughing again. I imagined a life without fear. And now, slowly, day by day, that imagined life is becoming real. We're not healed. Not fully. But we're healing. And one day, when that man is nothing more than a bitter voice in a voicemail, I'll look back at this time not with rage, but with pride. Because we survived him. And we never let him win.